These Ubuntu influence programs cultivate a culture of listening, especially to the poor and vulnerable, and nurture a synodal spirit of corresponsibility and relational holiness, forming women religious who are not only effective in ministry, but grounded in gospel-centered community life. The small Christian community model information, born from ecclesia in Africa, they are places where the word of God is shared, lived, discerned in daily life. For women religious, the small Christian community model provides formation in dialogue, shared decision-making, and pastoral closeness to people. They are spaces where the word becomes incarnate through communal discernment and action. It functions as a synodal microstructure, shaping pastoral identity through practices such as lectio divina, shared biblical reflection, and group discernment. The Balasa Indigenous African Listening Cycle. In East Africa, this kind of listening and consensus shows a model of leadership that values every voice, especially the marginalized. In formation, Balasa-style dialogue can form sisters to lead as facilitators of communion, not controllers of power. Baraza is more communal, it's more of dialogue, it's more of oneness, it's inclusive. Baraza, a practice of communal deliberation, embodies a cultural form of synodality rooted in respectful listening, consensus building, and elder-guided mediation, long predating similar ideas in church documents. The Balasa values silence as much as speech and fosters justice and inclusion through ordered participatory conversation. In religious formation, integrating Balasa-style leadership through round-table discussions, peer listening cycles, and communal gatherings cultivates a horizontal, inclusive leadership culture where each sister is heard and shares responsibility. Such practices enable sisters to experience leadership as participation rather than domination, welcoming them into leadership not by title but by voice. Integrating ecology, gender, and synodal formation. Many formation houses already integrate sustainable farming, reforestation, and ecological spirituality as part of daily life. This is more than environmentalism. It is integral ecology, linking care for creation with Eucharistic theology. This formation fosters charism discernment that both critiques harmful cultural norms, and honors African values of motherhood and communal care. Synodal formation is a transformative field of conversion, calling sisters to listen deeply to the land, their bodies, and their communities, each as a sacrament of the Spirit's core. In doing so, women religious become credible voices in global synodal dialogue, embodying African theology of stewardship, gender dignity, and relational ecclesiology. The challenges of a blessing integrated formation among today's youth. Digital distractions and loss of contemplative depth. The ambiguity of telephones and social media among formation communities has created spiritual noise and psychological fragmentation. Candidates may be obedient and industrious, but never actually listen, reflect, or interiorly keep silent. The decay of traditional authority and resistance to forming structures. Social media marketed young people are more self-focused, resistant to authority and credibility, celebrity, or opinion-driven when it comes to spirituality. It erodes traditional African models or values. When the formation is spiritually weak or culturally unhelpful, young sisters will appear to conform on the surface while remaining unconverted in their hearts, what Pope Francis calls functional hypocrisy, meaning forming small monsters in place of total conversion at heart. Poor remuneration or allowances or taxation by the Catholic Church structures for women religious. In many circumstances, African-founded women religious have suffered greatly at the hands of the Church. Some end up looking for other ways of survival as individuals or as institutions. Towards a response, a pastoral theological way forward, digital discernment and media literacy. Formation must include media literacy and theological analysis of virtual culture. Young sisters must learn how to discern what is forming their appetites and healthy digital boundaries and prayerful practices. Recovering the beauty and relevance of charism. Only a joyful witness relevant to charism will transcend spiritual inferiority. Formation must illustrate the charism as a dynamic spiritual power that can heal wounds, rebuild lives, and answer African needs. Experiential and synodal models of formation. Synodality practices need to be lived out by formation houses, collegial decision-making, dialogue, accompaniment, narratives, and mentoring. Witnesses of formators and superiors. The antidote to technological isolation and secularism is most likely the genuine witness of the formators women who are genuinely in love with their vocation, lived and loved and prayed in and trained in spiritual accompaniment rather than control. The formator must be a mystic, a servant, and a mother. Redefining professionalism as mission. Professionalism is valuable when integrated with vocation. Sisters must be skilled and spiritual. Ongoing formation ensures pastoral integrity. Ministries must serve people, not possessions. Gospel witness remains central. Renewing religious formation for 21st century. Formation must shift from academic attitude to spiritual depth, holistic growth, restoring rhythms of prayer, silence, and the gospel discernment. Create African-rooted programs. Prioritize personal transformation, not just external achievements. Prophetic sisters for today's church and society. Thus, consecrated life must challenge systems of power, greed, and exclusion. Sisters must be prophetic, speak truth, serve the poor, live simply. It would be spiritual depth, cultural integrity, pastoral vision, missionary professionalism. Conclusion. The young Africans today enter in religious life faced with deep tension. These tensions cannot be avoided or repressed, but felt, traveled with, and transformed by a formation process that is synodal, incarnate, and Christ-centered. In an attempt to implement synodal and integral formation, religious congregations will be compelled to transform their models, innovatively guarding against charism delusion. Only a life of ever-deepening and faithful contemplation with God can keep religious people attuned to the divine path, which is the call of all prophetic action. Therefore, when participating in the struggle for justice, religious people need to return again and again to the source of their vocation, the intimate union with God. It is in their contemplative communion with God that they learn how to live out their prophetic vocation in a concrete cultural context. Thank you for listening.
So thank you very much, Sister Anne. Give her another round of applause, please. Thank you. Our third speaker in this session will be Sister Dr. Jacinta Auma Opondo, a Franciscan sister of St. Anne. Sister Jacinta serves currently as the Deputy Principal for Academic Affairs here at Tekima University College. She holds a doctorate in Canon Law from the Gregorian University, a licentiate in Canon Law from the Angelicum in Rome, and a Master of Education from the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. She will be speaking to us about canon law sine qua non for synodal cohesion towards truth, justice, and mercy. You are welcome, Sister Jacinta. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to this third presentation of the morning. This presentation was motivated by two questions that keeps on recurring. I often get these two questions after the initiation of Synod on Synodality. What do we need, a synodal church or canon law? What needs to be reviewed in canon law in order for it to meet the needs of a synodal church? And therefore, I begin with an observation that these questions are actually based on regurgitated issues that have been arising right from before Vatican II Council. We have been discussing issues of seminary formation since the Council of Trent. Those of us who are not there, we have read them in the documents. And formation of the religious, from the inception of religious life itself. Likewise, the relationship between the bishops and religious institutes has been debated for centuries. Participation of the laity, including women at various ecclesial levels, have been discussed from the time of Vatican II Council and beyond. And in my opinion, these are clear signs that the focus seems to be more on the symptoms, while the root cause remains unaddressed. Consequently, just responding to the questions that were raised above will not sufficiently and effectively speak to the issues that are affecting working together in a synodal church. In this presentation, therefore, while attempting to answer those questions, that is canon law a sine qua non, I will also move further to try and unearth where the problem actually lies. Because of dwelling on the symptoms, many have associated canon law with bureaucracy, rigid rules that are hierarchically driven, and gender imbalance. This leads some to view canon law as a system of regulation that lacks compassion, the opposite of fair treatment, oppressive sometimes and discriminatory to women and lay faithful in general, and therefore counterproductive in a synodal journey. Begging the question, is canon law a sine qua non or a hindrance to a synodal journey? Let me begin by affirming that canon law is actually a sine qua non in journeying together in truth, justice, and mercy within a synodal church. It is the thesis of this presentation that unless the necessity of canon law is clearly understood and its requirements freely considered and implemented, it will not be possible to work together in truth, justice, and mercy, and to promote unity in diversity that is at the core of a synodal journey. And this is because canon law brings order, protects and promotes the rights and obligations of all, fosters justice, and serves the church's most important mission, the salvation of souls. And this is not only canon law. Any law actually is intended to respond to these needs. And any society requires some order. Even in the family, there are always rules. Often we hear parents saying, that cannot be done in my house. It's not written anywhere, but that indicates that there are certain regulations that must be followed for orderly living, even at family level. Law and synodality, therefore, are complementary. In fact, canon law already allowed for and even urged synodality before the Synod on Synodality. And we saw a very comprehensive compilation where collaboration is already acknowledged by the Church in canon law by presenter, the first keynote speaker, Professor Miriam. This is because the object of canon law is to serve as a legal instrument for the life of the people of God, so that the community of faith can translate the values of the kingdom into reality in accordance with the demands of justice and mercy. Whereas theology provides vision for the church, canon law provides norms, tools, and a system for action. Safeguards sacred realities such as the validity of the sacraments, and ensures that ecclesiastical institutions and offices operate with integrity and accountability. As St. John Paul II wrote during the promulgation of the 1983 Code of Canon Law, the 1983 Code of Canon Law actually translates Vatican II theology into a legal language. So whatever is in the Code of Canon Law is actually founded on Vatican II theology. Moreover, canon law understood from its spirit becomes a powerful tool for fostering unity in diversity, in collaborative ministry rooted in truth, justice, and mercy, and by emphasizing the foundational principles of justice, charity, and the common good. Canon law provides a framework for promoting greater participation and responsibility within the church while upholding its core values. Law within the church serves as a vehicle for mercy. Therefore, charity does not nullify justice, nor does it relativizes rights. Consequently, in the name of charity or mercy, we cannot neglect what is a duty of justice. Because charity itself requires the objectivity which is typical of justice. More so, through baptism, Christ's faithful receives a call to mission. And with this call comes a right and a duty to collaborate in mission. Canon law protects this right. Canon law provides a clear basis for active participation in the life and work of the church, a call for collaboration and shared responsibility in being what the church is, namely a communion on mission. Synodality calls for recognition of distinct functions of the members of the church, which are intended not to separate, but to help Christ discover this communion that the church needs in order to fulfill the mission of Christ. And therefore, the question arises, does something need to be reviewed in canon law in order for it to meet the needs of a synodal church? In the collaborative mission, justice requires giving each person their due. Canon law is the tool that assists the church in her mission to protect the dignity of all Christ faithful, upholds truth, reflects the love and justice of God, respects the rights of all, follows due process, and ensures accountability for wrongdoing, among others. This equality that canon law protects and which has a theological foundation is basically for mission. The church has a mission and all members are and ought to be participants in this mission by virtue of equality in being and baptism. Collaboration in mission, therefore, is an obligation, it's not a choice. In practice, however, as observed by a number of scholars and even the presenters of yesterday and before, the biggest obstacle to observing the spirit of the law are the bureaucracies which marginalize consultative bodies, violations of the rights, and a tendency to dominate over others, while the opportunities for the lay faithful to be involved in decision-making seems to be very minimal. In response to these challenges, the Synod's final document does propose a revision of canon law from a synodal perspective, particularly in terms of clarifying the distinction and relation between consultation and deliberation as it applies to ecclesial governance, and the respective role pastors and the lay faithful play in decision-making. However, it is the view of this presenter that just reviewing canon law is not a solution and may not produce the desired outcome. In any case, as observed by Bishop Matthew, many of the Synod's proposals for a more participatory and inclusive church are already possible within the existing structures and canonical frameworks, but are barely implemented. And Professor Waylands already gave us a comprehensive list. What then needs to be done? A conversion of the heart to a mindset of openness to the Spirit, since synodal events suppose novus habitus mentis, in the words of St. Paul VI, this is what the Church needs. And this has also been echoed by other scholars, such as Professor Waylands, as was given this morning. Therefore, what is the elephant in the room? The main underlying cause to the resistance to the novus habitus mentis is the hidden curriculum of systemic patriarchy. This must be effectively and adequately addressed to mitigate the resistance to change. Addressing this hidden curriculum is the first step in promoting an atmosphere of openness and synodal deliberations. And what do I mean by systemic patriarchy? Patriarchy, as applied in this presentation, is to be understood not in the narrow sense of limiting women's opportunities and decision-making, resulting in gender-based inequality, but it needs to be understood from its etymological meaning. Patriarchy comes from the Greek word for rule and father. It refers to the father having absolute control of families or clans. By extension, it also indicates male control of the entire society, with women excluded from community position. Therefore, patriarchy is nearly universal social system by which men dominate women and other men. It is a system of society and government where some men hold primary power and predominates in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. It is a social structure that maintains the idea of male superiority, leading to the subordination of women and other marginalized groups, be they male or female. And from this definition, we can deduce that patriarchy can exist in any relationship. It can exist in the relationship between parent and child, authority, subject, male, female, race that is perceived as superior and race that is perceived as inferior. When we talk of authority subject, we include men and women, because we have women who are also in positions of authority. It is not uncommon to find authority conflicts and oppressive behaviors, superiority complex, even in female institutes among themselves, as we had in the last presentation, or even among pious associations in the parish. These days, some of the pious associations in the parish, they don't work together. And normally, the problem is the other group considers themselves more superior, more important than this group. So just as women often feel oppressed by male authority, so the same women feel oppressed by their fellow women in leadership. Perpetuation of the hidden curriculum which creates systemic patriarchy happens mostly unconsciously in families and institutions, including formation houses. So in families, we have systemic patriarchy, which begins in the familial unit, in which patriarchal tradition, practices, and ideals are vertically transmitted from generation to generation. Parental guidance is shaped by patriarchal beliefs about gender norms, which are usually a large part of patriarchy in practice, and perpetuated through household, both consciously and unconsciously. Then we move to education, and we find patriarchal relations in institutions such as religion, media, education, which further perpetuate this systemic patriarchy. And we go to formation houses, and with candidates to formation houses coming from patriarchal families and institutions, then encountering formation that is basically patriarchy dominated, There is less emphasis during formation on fundamental rights of all human beings and of Christ's faithful, resulting in what I call pseudo-formation. Pseudo indicates that something is spurious or has a resemblance to something else without actually being what it is. What is the ripple effect of the hidden curriculum of systemic patriarchy? It leads to replacing equality in being and complementary in function with domination, deeply seated insecurities, belittling others, submission, manipulation, abuse of authority, and power struggle. Secondly, it leads to replacing formation with instruction. And finally, inadequate understanding of roles, canonical obligations, and rights. And those who suffer systemic patriarchy may belittle others or dismiss their opinions, creating an emotionally imbalanced environment, while deep-seated insecurities cause superiority or inferiority complex, and these complexes often act as a defense mechanism to mask feelings of inadequacy and vulnerability. Men might compensate for these insecurities by asserting dominance and sometimes being arrogant, while women become either overassertive or timid and very vulnerable. Individuals with this superiority complex may also exhibit constant need for asserting control in various interactions from family, friendships, and workplaces, and even places of mission. A formator with pseudo-formation can only give instruction. Therefore, she or he cannot teach with authority, since teaching with authority requires practicing what one teaches. Instruction gives to people getting married or those in formation the possibility of getting married or being clerics and being religious with clear knowledge of marriage, priestly or religious life in general. But if formation is limited to instruction, it risks forming families, priests, and religious specialists without arriving at the essence of the call to mission. The outcome is having married people, priests, and religious who are giants in theory, but actually dwarfs in practice. A formator who is a product of pseudo-formation has his or her own peculiar patriarchy idols, which prevent him or her from adequately educating learners on the complementarity of roles, canonical obligations, and rights. And the candidates consequently leave formation with very little understanding of collaborative mission and more patriarchy idols. Such formation affect collaborative ministry in the sense that when collaborators are not well formed about their canonical obligations and rights, collaborative ministry becomes a slow, time-consuming process which can allow power to be manipulative or vested in the few, with the following consequences: confusion about the nature of collaborative ministry and misunderstanding, generating tension and unnecessary conflict, and opening a door to factions, manipulation, and unhealthy politics. 2. Manipulation by self-promoting personalities, lack of tolerance of others' point of view, danger of clericalism and anti-clericalism, and lots of meetings which often are emotionally draining with minimal action. Pseudo-formation then acts as a buffer zone causing resistance. The result is more talks with minimal action. Usually one's meaning perspective is passively formed right through one's life experiences in childhood, during the youthful years, and in young adulthood. Meaning perspective may include real truths but also some idols. Whatever they are, as long as they are active, these elements serve as a filter in perceiving the present reality and in determining how to organize and interpret one's current experiences, or as buffer zones that block any new learning that is incompatible with the current. Hence, when a person gets married, or a cleric is ordained, or a religious takes his or her vows in a given institute, she or he assumes all obligations and is entitled to all rights that come with such vocation. The assumption is that there were no buffer zones in his or her formation. Therefore, she or he has a fundamental understanding of these obligations and rights. And this, okay, let me move on. So, what is the fundamental understanding? It is what provides the framework for leadership, membership, relationship, or cleric-lay relationship. Therefore, as long as insufficient fundamental understanding persists, there is bound to be conflict in mission, abuse of power, feelings of insecurity, violations of rights, and neglect of obligations. What is the role of women then? As clearly affirmed, canon law is necessary in journeying together in truth, justice, and mercy within a synodal church. And in this section, I wish to emphasize that women are essential protagonists in making this necessity of canon law clear, appreciated, internalized, and practiced. Okay. How do women do this? Women have all the capabilities to eliminate pseudo-formation, which requires 4 activities. 1, predisposition, preparation before actual formation, because the systemic patriarchy we are talking about begins right from home, and women are the ones who are mostly with the children. As we heard on the first day and second day, men sometimes are absent. Probably most of the time they are out, women are with the children. Formation of character takes place from 0 year to 6 years. Psychologists may confirm this. By the age of 12, the character is well established. What we can do is to mold that character. So women have the responsibility to impart the right values in these children and to deconstruct these patriarchy idols we are talking about. The second thing that is needed is holistic formation that does not remain at the level of instruction. Then we need research to deconstruct the beliefs on systemic patriarchy. And finally, advocating for implementation of canonical requirements for collaborative mission. This can only happen when we first get formed on these obligations. Many a times, women are not aware of the many rights and then the obligations that canon law give them in the church. And it is a very big challenge, not just lay people, but also religious women. So we need to get to be informed if we really want to address the issue of systemic patriarchy. And let me stop there.
Thank you very much, Sister Jacinta. Please join me in thanking her again. Thank you. She's my boss, so you will understand why I gave her a few extra minutes. I don't want trouble after the conference. So. Yeah. Now, you have been listening for more than an hour, so I will just ask you just to stand up where you are. You are not going out. Just stand for a moment, just to stretch your legs a bit. Mm-hmm. And then I was wondering about what kind of exercise you could. Yeah, you can just stretch. You can yawn as much as you want. And then I was thinking one exercise could be to punch. If anyone annoyed you this morning, just punch the air a bit, just to just punch whoever. You can fly, as Dr. Adebe is suggesting. Just stretch a bit, as much as you need to. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, really. So be seated. We have had a wonderful keynote speech this morning, and then in continuity with that, in line with canon law, we have had 3 good presentations by Sister Dr. Sabine Ursule Ngeme, Sister Anne Kirera Kinya, and Sister Dr. Jacinta Auma Opondo. So Sister Sabine spoke to us about ways in which the general chapter of a congregation can become, if you want, a synodal locus, and she relied on a number of cultural elements drawn from our African context, be it the African palaver, be it the question of Ubuntu or Jama, to show how really a general chapter of a congregation, through the convening, meeting, discerning, and deliberating, can really be a place where the synodal process is made really concrete in terms of the decisions that are eventually arrived at. Sister Anne highlighted for us a tension between pastoral identity and professionalization and professionalism, if you want, within religious life. And she underscored the need to redefine professionalism as mission in order to, if you want, rescue that pastoral identity that she feels maybe is being lost sometimes due to the hyper-professionalization that is observed in religious life. Sister Jacinta, stemming from questions that have been raised to her in connection to the synodal process, has helped us to view canon law not as an obstacle, if you want, to the synodal journey in truth, justice, and mercy, but really as something that could help enhance that. And she finished by inviting us to eliminate, pointing to steps that could help us eventually eliminate what she calls pseudo-formation. Now I will invite you to interact with our three panelists, to ask them questions, to contribute to what they have said eventually. And we are going to take a series of questions, and I will invite you to specify who you are asking your question to when you take the floor eventually. Ideally, in an ideal world, it would be good to have questions for all panelists. I will say we'll start with 2 questions for each of them, and then we'll see how we proceed going from there. So if you have any question, this is when I invite you to raise your hand, and then we'll call on you to express it. Yeah. Yes, we can start with Sister over there.
My question is to Sister Sabine. I will try to ask the question in French to her so that she can understand well what the points I'm coming from.
And then you translate it in English for the rest.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Ma sœur, je pose la question s'il y a quelque chose qui nous interdit à vivre l'expérience de la chapitre générale. L'expérience que nous avons faite pendant le chapitre général, après le chapitre général, l'expérience de la synodalité. So the question I ask her is there anything that stops us from living the experience of synodality that we've seen during the general chapters after the general chapter? Why does it stop with the general chapter? It doesn't continue in our lives after the general chapter. Even with the counselors, between the counselors and the superior general, it doesn't happen. Is there something that is blocking that? Thank you.
Thank you, Sister. So you're, okay, just behind Sister, and then there are 2 over there. Yeah.
Thank you. This is for Sister Anne. She talked about professionalism, that the sisters who are highly educated look down on the others, and that they don't carry forward the charism of the congregation. Those of us who teach in the universities, there's something you call town and gown symbiotic relationship. Like me, I teach. I also work with women who plant cassava in the villages, which is part of what our founders did, working with women and children. And we encourage that in our congregation. So we have sisters who are highly educated outside, like the ones you say when they come, they look down on those educated locally, which I really, when we were given that, I was wondering, what was going on there. So please, could you tell us more really what happens, when sisters who are teaching in higher institutions or being administrators in universities don't come down to the local and do that for which we were founded to start with. Thank you.
Thank you. So Alex over there with Professor Villens and Jean-Luc, and Father Jean-Luc. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, my name is Jean-Luc Enyege. Thank you for the wonderful presentations. I would like to invite us to pay attention to 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 22 to 23. It is where Paul is talking about the body. And as we pay attention to synodality, to a concrete space like a general chapter, that line of Paul is saying that the most vulnerable part of the body is the most essential. The most vulnerable is the most essential. So, are we not in a race to certain elitism, even within synodality itself? So, Sister Sabine, in that general chapter, do we not have the elite of the congregation? And maybe the most vulnerable, the weak and the wounded, the ostracized are left behind. And actually nobody was able to listen to them. In the practice of mercy and justice, I don't know what is the place of the abuser as well, for example. This is something that is coming up in the context of safeguarding. We listen to those who have been abused, rightfully so, but in that church, is their place to be less professional and pay attention to what the Spirit may communicate us through the experience of the abusers as well.
Traduis pour la sœur Sabine, Jean-Luc, la partie de la question.
Voilà, donc ma sœur, à partir de la première épître de Saint Paul aux Corinthiens, chapitre 12, versets 22 à 23, où il est dit que la partie la plus vulnérable du corps est la plus essentielle. Comment est-ce que cette partie-là est-elle représentée dans le chapitre général, où en fait on se retrouve avec une certaine élite de la congrégation, alors que ceux qui sont blessés, marginalisés, parfois ils sont restés derrière et dans certains cas peuvent même constituer la majorité.
Thank you. Professor Villens.
So my question goes also to Sister Sabine. It's on the similar line of the previous question that was raised. You work for the apostolate in a congregation, and the synod is talking about the marginalized. Often your apostolate is about the marginalized. Are you talking about them in the chapter, or are you giving them a voice? That doesn't mean you give away the right to decide, but are you giving those who you serve? The Catholic Church has signed the International Convention on the Rights of Children. How do you listen to the voices of the children? And my second is a comment, maybe a comment for Sister Jacinta. Thank you for your presentation. Maybe because it was not made explicit, but the final document, and maybe you can reflect on this, the final document of the Synod tries not to use the word complementarity. There was among the drafters a conscious decision based on what was heard and came from the floor to use the word reciprocity. And the difference between the two is, I'm just reading a little text, maybe that will help. Complementarity describes a relationship where different qualities such as strength and weaknesses balance each other to form a functional whole, like strong and weak partners supporting each other. In contrast, reciprocity refers to a mutual exchange or give and take between individuals or groups, where one action is met with a similar or equal action, such as exchanging gifts between each other. So that's more the notion of catholicity. And I think if we pick up that terminology from the final document, we might, I'm just wondering if you would have any thoughts about this. Thank you.
Voilà, donc la sœur Sabine, la question du professeur Willens, c'est dans la droite ligne de ce que le père Jean-Luc demandait au sujet de la présence. Comment est-ce que les voix des personnes les plus vulnérables sont représentées au niveau du chapitre général? Alors, qu'est-ce que vous faites pour prêter attention ou écouter ces personnes vulnérables-là dans le contexte du chapitre? Voilà. Okay, let's add 2 voices and then we'll give the floor to our panelists. I hope you have been taking note of the questions addressed to you. Okay. So, Sister Gisela and Father Elise at the back. Alex. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, sisters, for your presentations. My question is addressed to Sister Anne. I listened to you, and I was happy to hear you talk what you've given to us. But this is my question. Concerning religious life, you said religious life is not a way of generating income. And I know we religious, we work in schools, in hospitals, as social workers. And in schools, we are being paid. Salaries are being given to us, or in the hospitals. It's true we equally pay those who are working with us. And my question is this: if we have in mind that it's not going to generate income, how do we live when we do not have somebody to take care of our table, our dressing, and all of that? I end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Elise.
Thank you very much, and thank you for you sisters, your wonderful presentations. My question goes to Sister Anne. If I understood you well, your point is that the modern life has the imperative of professionalizing, because life is changing and is really demanding to develop some professional skills. But at the same time, these professional skills need to be informed by gospel values and pastoral approach. Now the question is, how do we cast the balance? Probably if you could clarify where this imbalance comes from, because we have had pastoral actors who actually showed some sense of professionalism and yet rooted in their values. So is it the influence of the secularism, or is it a failure on our part as religious to actually live out our gospel values? Thank you.
So one last one, and then we'll give the floor to our panelists.
Thank you, Father. My question is for Sister Jacinta. Thank you for the knowledge shared with us. Now, how do we reconcile the African tradition that men should dominate women? Men are superior in some culture, with the systemic patriarchy that you spoke about. Then you suggest that women should begin training the children from the family. The women themselves who are dominated by men, who do not even believe that they could do that. Some of them don't even believe they are leaders. And the next question is, how do we get this message to our women, saying they should begin to train the children from the families? Thank you.
So thank you very much. We are now going to give the opportunity to our presenters to respond to the questions that were asked to them. I will ask them to be succinct, to be brief in their responses. That way we can have another opportunity to take more questions. So, thank you. We will go in the order in which you presented. So we'll start with Sister Sabine. Thank you.
Ok. Merci pour les questions qui m'ont été posées. Je commence par la dernière question, qui est la même pour le Père Jean-Luc et pour le professeur. Alors, je voudrais dire une chose pour commencer. Il est prévu à chaque institut, pour chaque institut, d'avoir un droit capitulaire. C'est ce que le législateur prévoit. Ce document fait partie du droit propre de l'institut. Dans ce droit capitulaire que chaque institut doit décrire comment doit se dérouler le chapitre général à partir de la convocation jusqu'à l'exécution des actes capitulaires. Voilà. Maintenant, dans ce document, ici, la question est relative à la représentation des membres de l'Institut au chapitre général. Dans le canon 631, là, qui parle de la composition ou de la représentation, on demande aux membres de l'Institut de faire attention à la représentation. De prime abord, il y a les membres de droit, il y a les membres élus. C'est sur les membres élus qu'il faut jouer, sur la représentation. Et ici, on doit faire attention aux minorités de l'Institut. Maintenant, comment calculer ces minorités de l'Institut? Les minorités ne sont pas seulement relatives à la langue ou bien à l'ethnie. Les minorités renvoient aussi à l'activité qu'exerce l'une ou l'autre catégorie des membres. Il revient donc aux membres de l'Institut de bien calculer ces minorités de manière à ce que celles-ci soient représentées au niveau du chapitre. Je n'ai pas la potion magique pour vous l'indiquer, parce que même dans ma congrégation, c'est tout un problème pour que tout le monde soit représenté. Mais il revient à chaque institut de trouver des voies et moyens pour le faire. C'est pour dire que le chapitre général n'est pas une représentation des élites, Père Jean-Luc. Non. Si nous pensons comme ça, c'est nous-mêmes qui envoyons les représentants au chapitre général. Et donc, c'est à nous de bien jouer. Qui envoie-t-on? Les élites ou bien les minorités? Ça, c'est d'un point. De l'autre point...
On peut traduire pour que les gens ne se perdent pas. Okay. Just briefly, Sister was saying that for each religious congregation, there are rules laid out regarding the conduct of the convocation, conduct of the general chapter, and ways in which the acts of that chapter are eventually implemented. And regarding those who eventually make it to the chapter, there is a certain attention given to the fact that all minorities within the religious order have to be represented at that chapter. It could be linguistic minorities, it could be ethnic minorities, but it could also be in terms of the representation of professions, areas of activities present in the congregation. And as such, the general chapter is really not a meeting of the elites of the congregation. And so each religious order has to pay attention and has its own way of determining how those vulnerable or marginalized voices within the order are represented at that chapter. But that she doesn't have a magical potion to, or a magical solution, a magic bullet that will eventually resolve this issue. But there is a clear invitation in the canon law to make sure that all these different voices eventually find their way to the table of discussion at the general chapter.
Okay, thank you. La représentation, c'était la représentation par rapport aux membres élus. Maintenant, il y a une autre représentation pour ceux qui n'ont pas été élus. Il revient toujours au droit propre, donc au droit capitulaire, de mentionner comment les plus vulnérables, professeur, comment les plus vulnérables peuvent être représentés. Donc, dans le droit capitulaire, on doit bien indiquer, puisque l'instrumentum laboris est élaboré par rapport aux sessions, aux débats qui ont été eus d'abord dans les communautés religieuses, et puis ainsi de suite, les personnes. Maintenant, ça peut arriver que les voix des personnes n'ont pas été prises en considération dans les débats, soit des communautés, soit des sections, des secteurs, soit des commissions. Il est prévu que celui qui veut faire entendre sa voix au chapitre général écrive au chapitre général et envoie cela au secrétariat technique qui enregistre tout ce qui doit aller au chapitre général. Et cela doit être bien défini dans le droit propre aussi, parce que tout le monde ne va pas se lever pour écrire à n'importe quel moment. Il y a un temps indiqué où on doit recevoir les lettres, soit des personnes, soit des communautés. Peut-être une communauté estime que sa voix n'est pas entendue. Elle écrit et elle envoie au secrétariat technique du chapitre général qui enregistre la lettre, et au moment venu, il y a un temps au chapitre général où on doit dépouiller ces voix qui n'ont pas été prises en compte. Et pour tout cela, il revient toujours au droit propre de bien décrire comment présenter ces voix qui n'ont pas été entendues.
So, she said the first thing she said was in connection to the elected members to the general chapter, to make sure that marginalized voices are represented. But now, for those who are not elected to the general chapter, the rules should equally clearly lay out ways in which those who feel as if their voice is not represented in the instrumentum laboris, for instance, in preparation for the general chapter, should equally have the opportunity to write, so that the technical secretariat of the general chapter should note down what they have to say, such that when the chapter meets, that should find its way into the plenary session of the chapter. And that should be, the rules should be clearly laid out regarding when you can write, so that there isn't any kind of disorder or chaos regarding that also. But that, under normal circumstances, there should be an opportunity for others who feel that in those who have been elected to the chapter, they are not represented, to write, even as an individual, to the secretariat of the chapter, and that will be reflected in the discussions.
Voilà, ça c'était pour la première, et la deuxième et la troisième question. J'ai répondu.
Those, she feels she has answered her first three questions in that. So.
La première question. Y a-t-il quelque chose qui interdit la synodalité après le chapitre général? Non. J'ai choisi le chapitre général comme l'un des moyens d'expression de la synodalité. Ça ne veut pas dire que c'est l'unique ou bien qu'il exclut d'autres moyens. Après le chapitre général qui édicte les normes auxquelles tous doivent obéir, maintenant la vie normale doit commencer dans l'institut, non? Après le chapitre. Et dans un institut religieux, il y a d'autres moyens d'exercer la synodalité. Et je crois que dans le document final, on a fait mention des organes de participation, par exemple. Et dans un institut religieux, on a les organes de participation à différents niveaux. Il y a par exemple le conseil local de la communauté, le conseil provincial, le conseil général que la sœur a mentionné. Donc, ces moments constituent également des moments où on peut vivre de la synodalité. Une réunion communautaire, par exemple, c'est un moment indiqué aussi où les religieux peuvent vivre de la synodalité. Donc, j'ai pris seulement le chapitre général comme l'une des voies donc qui ne ferme pas les autres voies. Je crois que j'ai répondu aussi. Merci.
So there was a question about what eventually prevents us from living synodality beyond the general chapter. So she believes that there's normally nothing preventing us from going forward in other aspects of our life together after the general chapter to live out that synodality. That she just focused on the general chapter as one instance. She says even community meetings, weekly community meetings could be an area where synodality can be lived out. But I'm sorry to step in here, but if I understood Sister's question correctly, it was in terms of, okay, what obstacles are there after the synod? La question de la sœur, c'était un peu, quels sont les obstacles qui sont là, qui font qu'après le synode, on arrive, après le chapitre général, cet esprit de synodalité qu'on peut voir dans le travail du chapitre général, on ne le retrouve pas dans l'après-chapitre général, dans l'implémentation. Et même, elle disait, même au sein du conseil de la supérieure générale, après le chapitre général, on ne ressent pas forcément qu'il y a un esprit de synodalité qui continue.
Ah, d'accord. Ça, ben, je pense qu'il y a... il y a la norme et puis il y a l'esprit dans laquelle la norme doit être appliquée. Et à côté de cela, il y a des personnes qui doivent réceptionner et vivre ce qui est prévu. La sœur a parlé des responsables qui mettent en avant leur personnalité au lieu de tout ce qu'on est en train de décrire là. Je crois qu'il y a tout ça qui fait que, après la tenue d'un chapitre général, on a la difficulté de la mise en œuvre des actes du chapitre. Celui ou celle qui a été élu peut estimer que c'est sa personnalité qu'elle doit mettre en valeur. Et donc on passe à côté de la feuille de route, si on peut l'appeler ici, du chapitre général. Ça arrive, ça arrive. Mais maintenant, les autres membres de la communauté peuvent revenir de temps en temps à ces différents niveaux de participation de la vie de l'Institut. On avait mis en avant telle activité qui ne se fait pas. Comment on fait? Donc, à ces différents niveaux de la participation de la vie, on devrait revenir. Par exemple, il y a les chapitres de mi-parcours où on doit évaluer. Ça, c'est un moyen pour revenir, pour demander pourquoi ce n'est pas fait, pourquoi on ne met pas en avant ce qui a été prévu. Mais comme je disais, la difficulté, c'est nous-mêmes, les personnes. Chacun a son caractère et puis dans nos communautés religieuses, ça fait tout ce que ça fait. Mais personnellement, j'ai toujours dit, on va faire les discours, on va faire dire tout ce qu'on a dit, mais s'il n'y a pas un désir de conversion, qui est même l'un des moyens de la synodalité, hein, parce que si on estime qu'on peut écouter ce que dit l'autre, ça veut dire qu'il y a un désir de se convertir, de laisser son ego et de mener en avant ce que le groupe a décidé. Donc personnellement, il y a à convoquer ici un esprit de conversion au quotidien pour qu'on puisse aller de l'avant, pour qu'on puisse construire ensemble. Voilà.
So she says that some of the obstacles to the implementation of that synodal spirit past the general chapter could have to do with the norm, the difference between the norm and the spirit of the norm at the end of the day, but more so personalities, personal idiosyncrasies, egos standing in the way of the implementation of that spirit past the general chapter, that those could be obstacles, but that the members of the congregation have ways in which they can call those who are in charge of implementing that spirit back to order. For instance, referring to the acts of the general chapter and asking why those acts are not being put into practice. Or they could also be, if you want, intermediary chapters in the meantime to assess ways in which the acts of the general chapter have been implemented. That's what she views as ways in which those obstacles can eventually be overcome, be addressed in a certain way. But she acknowledges the fact that personalities, personal idiosyncrasies, egos, etc., can stand in the way of implementing that synodal spirit past the general chapter. So I'll now give the floor to, thank you, Sister Sabine. I'll now give the floor to Sister Anne. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would wish to start with the first question, the concerns of Sister that I pointed out that highly educated are looking down over the uneducated and kind of focusing on the education other than the charism. And she felt that it's not so. But as I said, it is a problem that is growing or coming up, distracting the process. It's not a problem in the charism, it's not a problem in the structure, it's not a problem in professional skills. It's a problem within the formation of our mind. That when institutions ask us to come with professions, we think it's so much of career, and we are not able to understand that it is directed to efficiency in our sharing in the ministries of Christ. When we go teaching, we are having a sharing in the ministry of teaching of Christ, who was the model teacher. If we go in the ministry of health, it's because we have a sharing in the ministry of healing of Jesus, so that our ideas are not so much directed to the skills, but the skills are meant to serve the ministry, and that is why we are talking of the gospel values. So if it has not come to your institutions, it is flocking. That among the modern communities, the modern members, they are feeling of the understanding of more of profession than more of the sharing in the ministries of Christ. The other question was now, how can we integrate the careers and the gospel values? I think that's why I brought in the idea of the formation being rooted in our African values, being rooted in our gospel values, and the greatest model of the gospel is Christ. And the African values all bring more of communion and a sharing, not a hierarchical system, but a sharing of communion that my strength become the strength of the other. And all of it geared towards the ministerial or apostolic works of the church. Sister also asked about our having institutions, taking part in social works, having salaries, and having maybe like our hospitals, our schools, and whatever it may be that we are having that brings income. Sister will help me. I think in the church, canonically, we don't talk about salaries. We talk about remuneration and allowances. So what we receive are meant to help us to make better the ministries of Christ, to serve our basic needs. I think also the gospel says every servant eats in the house where the servant is serving. And so it does not eliminate receiving or remuneration or receiving of allowances so that we are able to have the basic needs that helps us to serve better in the ministries of Christ. So our institutions are not profit-based. They are so much of ministerial, and even their objectives and visions and mission is to serve the people of God, to bring the social transformation. That's why I would think that the most important thing is to know the idea. We are not getting the skills or these institutions for the purpose of the modern demand in the face of secular attitudes, but the demands of the signs of time for the ministries of Christ. The other question was almost the same. What do we do to balance professionalism and gospel values? And we focus on the mission and vision and objectives of the ministries we take part in, because each of it has its mission, its objective, and its ministry. Like we realize, I don't know, in other countries, I may not be the consultant in this, but we are even having waiver taxations over the church projects, because we are meant to be missionaries to serve the people. And that's why I think the whole idea is the formation of our system, so that we know my professional skills are all geared towards serving the ministries. Thank you. If anyone would have more to say about it, I would also appreciate more ideas.
Thank you, Sister Anne. Thank you. We'll give the floor to Sister Jacinta.
Thank you. Let me begin with the first questions addressed to me first, then I'll come to what Sister requested. How do we reconcile African cultural tradition that emphasize that men are superior and systemic patriarchy? The only way, we don't need to reconcile actually, we need to deconstruct that belief. Simply because this belief does not have any empirical evidence. At least in my reading, I've not met any empirical evidence stating that men are superior than women. And in my reading of the scripture that is normally quoted, Genesis, that interpretation no longer holds. We are talking of equality based on creation and baptism. So what is needed is to do more research and come out with evidence that deconstructs that belief. And once that is there, then this needs to be communicated, and now this is where women comes in. Already they have this belief in them. The only way to deconstruct any existing hidden curriculum is first to acknowledge that it exists. Therefore, it calls for predisposition preparation. And the only way to predispose what is in one who needs to be formed is to create the awareness that this actually exists. Because this is a hidden curriculum, and so people are not even aware that it is going on. In education, we normally talk of acknowledging the hidden curriculum. When you are preparing any curriculum, always look for the hidden curriculum. What is going to hinder what you want to communicate? Because it is always lying somewhere. Because unless you address it, what you are communicating may not achieve the intended objective. So the first step is to acknowledge that this hidden curricula is there and it is existing. And I would propose that we probably need a course in our learning institution and our formation houses called Systemic Patriarchy. Just to expose that this exists, and how do we go about it? Because once we are aware, from there we can find how to deconstruct it. And deconstructing it should not end in apologetics literature, because that will not help. Where we are only emphasizing how it is affecting us, we are supposed actually to emphasize how to neutralize it. And it is only the religious can do a lot in this, because the religious have these children in our institutions, sometimes from pre-kindergarten, and at least the religious have this information. If parents are already deeply rooted in the belief that they are dominated. And once it is it's going to be a process. It's not something that will be realized tomorrow, because these young children have to grow up with a different mentality. But if we wait until they come to our formation houses, then it is very difficult to deconstruct this. But it is possible. What I'm emphasizing is deconstructing does not mean that we move from one extreme to the other extreme, but we need a balance, and that is the challenge. Then that is connected to the second question. Women at home are already dominated. So we need women who are already aware that this exists. And so it need not only to be done at homes, let us extend it to our schools. We have a number of us who serve in elementary level of education. I've met children, I once taught in a primary school. And what you tell these children, when they go back home, the parents tell them something different, they'll tell the parents, no, the teacher said. And that actually proved to me that it is possible to have an impact in a child when you are not a parent. Because they take it, what the teacher says at that age for them is the truth. Even the parent cannot change it. So that is the time that we can teach them the values that promote this fundamental equality we are talking about. And with fundamental equality, we are leading towards reciprocity, as Professor Williams has just communicated. And with that, we'll not have men dominating women or women dominating men, because that is also possible. We have seen also women who are actually domineering where they are. Religious. Okay, how do we have these rich women? Again, it should be part of our ministries. A number of us here have expressed that they do some social work. We interact with women. And they are ready to listen. People are yearning for knowledge. From experience, the courses that we offer for lay faithful, we have one called Theology for the Laity. It was there, it stopped for some reasons, we have revived it. Those who have passed through that program, they totally have a different way of looking at things. So if they are made aware, there will be some impact. May not be 100%, but it is possible to have some impact. Sometimes certain things happen because people do not have the correct information. So we have a responsibility, we who are now informed of this. The approach is very important. I just said, if we approach it from apologetics perspective, it may not have the impact that is desired. But we need to have a balance. Going to the question of remuneration and allowances, what normally is intended is not working for salary because we are on mission, but there is what we call social impact entrepreneurship. Any activity that the religious are engaged in is not supposed to be geared towards profit making only. It's supposed to have some impact in the lives of the people. But for that mission to continue, the church allows the religious to engage in ministries that also bring in some income, because for you to carry out the mission, you also need resources, both human and material. So religious can be engaged in activities that bring in income. However, it must have the component of social impact. It must have some change, development towards a positive benefit in the lives of the people. So that is important. The only challenge is if it is basically profit making, then there is risk because it easily becomes exploitative. So it is a question of receiving what we need for the mission. The terminologies, whether it is called salaries, it is called remuneration, it is called stipend, as long as there's justice in what one is receiving, it is not contrary to the social teachings of the church or the canon law. But again, we don't need to use these terminologies like stipend to exploit. You know, we talk a lot about justice, and sometimes our own institutions may remunerate those who are serving. And sometimes we find ourselves in trouble with the state law. And some of us have been taxed. From my experience in my mission with the religious, the laity, sometimes some institutions have been fined to pay heavily for how those who are collaborating with us in mission were treated. So it is a question of justice. And we are not supposed to be demanding for payment for everything, because then we become materialistic. But also we are not supposed to be rendering all free services, because our mission has to stand. So it's a question of discerning where we need to offer free services. Let us render free services because we are on mission. Where we are supposed to be remunerated, let us demand that we be remunerated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Jacinta, and thank you to all three of you for those answers. I think we still have time to take another series, but this time around we'll not take up to 3 or 4 questions per panelist, at most 1 or 2 for each of them. So if there's anyone wants to ask a question or react to something that has been said. Yes, Professor Okure, and then yes, Sister at the back, Alex, with the microphone. And then, yeah. Please, as in the first round, specify to whom your question is addressed.
Okay. Sabine, la question, si la synodalité n'existe pas comme mode de vie dans la congrégation, est-ce que ça va exister? Il y aura la synodalité à la chapitre général. Qu'est-ce qu'on doit faire pour assurer que la vie de la congrégation est une vie synodale? Parce que la vie religieuse, par essence, est ou devrait être une vie synodale. Qu'est-ce qu'on a cité le corps au chapitre 12, 1 Corinthiens 12? Bon, je laisse la question.
Vous pouvez traduire, ma soeur.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, merci.
No, what I'm saying is, if there is no, the life of the congregation is not a synodal life, there is no synodality in the life of the congregation, is there going to be a synodality at the level of the general chapter? And if within the congregation are those who are dominated and those who are being, those who dominate, those who are being dominated, the minority, even the terms minority and this, does it belong to the religious congregation? So what do we do to ensure that the religious life is a synodal life? Because that's what it's supposed to be. That's my question. Sister Jacinta, thank you for your presentation. I mean, I didn't say thank you, but that's taken for granted, the rest of you. If I heard you correctly, you said that the code of canon law needs to be evangelized, if I heard you correctly. And I think the 1983 code did require that. And I was citing in a conversation just now that Benedict XVI in Verbum Domini, the word of God in the life and mission of the church, saying that everything needs to be done from the perspective of Scripture, meaning from the perspective of Jesus. So my question is, maybe before I put my question, you know, the question is connected with what Father Marcel asked this morning. Hierarchy and synodality are mutually exclusive. I think we need to address that question. And during the chapter, I mean, during the synod, before people sat hierarchically, I was there for the Second African Synod as a perita. But in this synod, people were sitting in a circle, and we had lay people and religious and voting, having equal voice. All right? So that's what I heard by hierarchy and synodality being mutually exclusive. So my question is something being done to evangelize canon law? All those terms that we heard this morning, I didn't have time to ask my question, but it raised so many questions in me. I mean, when Sister Miriam was making her presentation, do we continue to parallel the gospel one and the canon law one, or is there a way of, you know, synchronizing them so that canon law itself promotes a synodal way of being church? Thank you.
Thank you. So, Alex, after that, you give it to Sister Josephine, and then you come this way.
I have a question for Sister Sabine. Ma question est de savoir, je pense qu'une partie de cela a été déjà répondue, mais je voulais que vous essayiez de nous aider un peu à comprendre. Tout à l'heure, vous avez parlé de la participation différenciée et de co-responsabilité. Comment est-ce que ces deux aspects peuvent s'articuler de manière concrète dans la vie religieuse à différentes étapes de la vie communautaire? Sister was talking about what she called participation according to one's charism, according to one's role. So my question is to know how can we integrate those aspects at a different level of religious life, or maybe even the level of the community. My other question is for Sister Anna. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. And I would like to know, we are talking about synodality, and somewhere you mentioned also the necessity of training the formees, young people in formation concerning this practice of synodality. Can you just help us also to understand how can we train the formees in synodality, participation, decision-making? And because most of the time we know formation, the formees are most of the time in a listening posture. So they are more receptive to what we teach them, to what we tell them. And at this level of synodality, they are also called to say something, to take some decision, which can also be applied in the community. So maybe in a concrete way, how can we live that experience today also? Thank you.
Thank you, Sister. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, presenters, for the excellent work you have done. I come back again to the issue of a religious looking down upon another on the basis of academic qualification. And my question is to this person who looks down upon the other, what is the perspective that this person has towards that academic qualification or credential that she or he has. And this could happen not only in the religious life, but even to the lay people. If at the back of their mind, they don't have the clear meaning and the purpose for which you have those credentials, then it creates problems in the community. So my question is, how can we go deeper to deconstruct such kind of maybe some perspectives that really doesn't help? Then there was a question about a balance between professionalism and gospel values. My question is it really a balance? Can we balance gospel values and professionalism? I think it should be like the priority and what sustains the other. Thank you.
Thank you. I take it those questions were for Sister Anne. And Sister Josephine. Okay, thank you. So come this way, please. Okay. Yeah.
Merci beaucoup pour les présentations. Ma sœur, j'ai une petite question, peut-être de clarification. Quand on parle du conseiller, et puis de délibération et de prise de décision, comment est-ce qu'on peut avoir la différence? Puisque souvent les gens confondent les choses. Vous êtes conseiller, mais aussi il y a quelqu'un qui prend la décision. And I think Sister Jacinta can answer the same question. So really demarcating some lines between having an advisory role and decision or consultation and decision making, decision taking. And that can apply certainly to a chapter, ça peut se référer au chapitre, mais même dans l'organisation en général. That can go to a chapter or even in an organization in leadership. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Just behind you, Marcel, the microphone to Sister in Blue there. And then we'll finally come to Dr. Adebe here.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. And thanks to our presenters today. My question is to Sister Jacinta, responding to the statement, giants in theory and dwarfs in practice, as a result of pseudo-formation. I am looking at it from a perspective of a girl child who grows in a family and the mother keeps telling her your father is bad in quotes. And this forms a kind of perception from the girl point of view that this father is not supportive, does not provide as he should, and eventually she joins religious life and she finds the same from the women leaders. So she looks at these women as the father figure and she decides to comply, you know, to be just former, she just conforms to what the authority says. And it could also happen on the other side of male formation. And when they come out from the formation, what we see is something different as opposed to what this candidate was in the formation. So I don't know how to define that, because looking at the youths of today, and you rightly said the canon law was revived at some point, they seem not to embrace the traditions of the church. They look at that as something obsolete. And so to help them understand that this carries some weight as far as the church is concerned, for me, the youths of today find that as something that is not viable, is not what you can keep telling them. They want to see something different today as opposed to what the church holds as a value. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adebe.
So add my thanks to the speakers. So quickly to Sister Jacinta, I think I missed the connection between institutionalized patriarchy, revision of canon laws, and women, participation of women. If you can just tighten that argument for me. And then for Sister Anne and Sister Josephine, in terms of going back to culture, that seems to be more a rural setting. What about an urban setting where people are getting information from social media and film and are disconnected from those traditional practices? How do we engage with the urban-rural divide? Once again, thank you.
Thank you. So a very last one, as brief as possible. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Ma question s'adresse à Sœur Sabine. Je voulais savoir comment pensez-vous concilier la synodalité avec l'intégration de la jeunesse dans la vie religieuse et mettre fin à ce qu'on a pu observer. Je parle en tant que parent, en tant qu'éducatrice et en tant que paracancela. On a remarqué dans les années passées où la technologie n'était pas avancée qu'il y a eu beaucoup de renvois de jeunes filles, presque même à la fin de leur formation, même troisième année, quand on fait l'évaluation, on les ramène en famille. Et ça les a beaucoup affectées. Et ces jeunes filles sont devenues peut-être traumatisées, certaines n'ont pas pu même s'engager dans la vie de mariage, et ça créait des frustrations dans la famille et peut-être pour la vie de la jeune fille. Comment mettre fin à cette situation? Parce que c'est une situation qui est vraiment très préoccupante. Deuxième volet, c'est de savoir si la conférence des femmes théologiennes peut penser à cela aussi comme un remède pour créer aussi un centre de récupération de ces jeunes filles-là qui ont commencé la vie de religieuses, mais qui n'ont pas pu encore se retrouver dans la vie de mariage et qui sont restées blessées. Comment la synodalité peut intégrer cet aspect aussi? Merci beaucoup.
Vous pouvez traduire ça rapidement, brièvement. Pardon. Ah, d'accord. J'ai cru à l'accent qu'elle parlait anglais. Yeah. Alors, vas-y, Jean-Luc. Voilà. J'ai été un peu distrait, donc je n'ai pas suivi. Ok, dans la réponse de la sœur, on pourra saisir ce qu'elle voulait dire. So, sisters, I'm going to ask you to do something that I'm incapable of doing myself. Basically, take 2 minutes each and try to briefly address some of the points that were made. If anything really intersects, then you put it together. Because you are the only thing standing between us and our plate of ugali right now. So make sure you do that quickly. So thank you. Sister Sabine.
Okay, thank you. Je vais commencer par la question de professeur Thérèse Okouré. Alors, j'ai envie de dire, et je crois que ça fait partie de la vérité historique, que la synodalité est intégralement liée à la vie consacrée. C'est pourquoi je suis partie de mon propos en prenant l'exemple des religieux, de la vie monastique. Et donc, c'est plutôt, ici je dirais que c'est plutôt la vie consacrée qui apprend à l'Église sur la synodalité. Donc, au départ de la vie monastique, l'abbé, pour prendre une décision, convoquait tous les frères et devait écouter surtout le plus petit. C'est après avoir écouté tous les frères et surtout le plus petit qu'il pouvait prendre un temps pour discerner et prendre la décision. Donc pour moi, la vie consacrée est intimement liée à cette pratique. Dire que comment la vie religieuse pourrait vivre sans la synodalité, non. la vie religieuse a toujours vécu ainsi. Et pour dire une chose contraire, c'est que dans ma congrégation, pendant les années du synode sur la synodalité, il y a eu des formations permanentes sur la synodalité. Alors il y a une sœur qui dit, mais finalement, vous nous fatiguez avec votre affaire de synodalité. C'est comme si le mot là a commencé à exister aujourd'hui. Elle dit non, évidemment, le mot n'a pas commencé à exister aujourd'hui. L'Église se rend compte certainement que l'expression n'est pas vécue telle qu'on aimerait qu'elle soit vécue, et c'est pour cela qu'on revient sur le concept et que le pape a eu la brillante idée de convoquer le synode sur la synodalité pour entrer dans la profondeur de la pratique. Parce qu'évidemment, les organes de participation existent depuis. Le Conseil pour les affaires économiques a toujours existé dans l'Église. Le Conseil général a toujours existé dans un institut religieux. Donc, certainement, on a vu qu'il y avait un problème dans l'implémentation de cette pratique. Alors, le pape nous demande de nous tourner davantage pour aller en profondeur. Donc, pour moi, la vie religieuse existe toujours dans un esprit synodal, dans un esprit de communion, tout comme l'Église. Tout comme l'Église. Et donc, le mot n'existe pas qu'aujourd'hui avec le synode sur la synodalité. Pour la vie consacrée, le concept a toujours existé et on a toujours vécu dans cet esprit-là. Il y a une question sur la participation différenciée, la co-responsabilité. Évidemment, dans une communauté religieuse, dans un institut religieux, tous les membres n'exercent pas les mêmes responsabilités. Il y a le supérieur local, il y a le supérieur provincial, il y a le supérieur général, il y a les conseillers, il y a les simples membres, il y a les économes. Chacun participe donc à l'édification de la communauté selon la position qu'elle occupe. Et bien évidemment, les supérieurs doivent respecter ce qu'on appelle le principe de subsidiarité. Tu ne vas pas aller prendre la décision sur une parcelle de responsabilité qui avait été réservée à quelqu'un. Non. Participation différenciée veut donc dire que chacun vient construire la communauté selon la responsabilité qui lui a été donnée dans le respect des responsabilités de l'autre, sans piétiner, sans emboîter dans la responsabilité de l'autre. Je pense que c'est ainsi que la communauté peut exister.
So, at the level of participation, she said, first, to the first question, connected to synodality and religious life, she agrees with Professor Okure that synodality is really intrinsic and essential part of what it means to be religious at the end of the day. It doesn't just begin with the synod on synodality, but it's a part of it. It's a part of it. In answer to the question of that if there is no synodality in the way the congregation functions, that's not going to happen at the end of the day at the level of the general chapter. On the question on differentiated participation, she says each one in the religious congregation takes an active role in the edification, in the building of the community based on the position that is theirs. And she insisted on the importance of subsidiarity, with superiors not making decisions in the place of those to whom they have delegated the authority.
Voilà, merci. Parlant de oui, la participation, on a fini sur la question du Père Marcel sur le conseiller, la délibération, la décision. Alors, je veux répondre ici à deux niveaux. D'abord, au niveau du conseil général. Le conseiller, comme on dit, doit conseiller le supérieur provincial ou régional. Du point de vue canonique, on considère ce conseil à deux niveaux. il y a un vote délibératif et un vote consultatif. Et après, le supérieur doit décider suite à l'un des deux votes. À la seule différence que le vote délibératif lie celui qui doit décider. Parce qu'ici, il est question de prendre le consentement du conseil. Lorsque le consentement est donné à celui qui décide, il doit seulement procéder selon le consentement qui a été donné. Par contre, le vote consultatif peut être pris en considération. D'abord, chaque fois que le droit demande que le supérieur fasse un vote consultatif, il doit le faire. Première chose. Et lorsque le vote consultatif est fait, le supérieur est libre de prendre l'avis qui a été donné ou pas. Cependant, s'il ne prend pas l'avis qui a été donné par le conseil, il doit motiver, justifier pourquoi est-ce qu'il ne prend pas cet avis. Mais chaque fois que ce vote lui est demandé, il doit toujours recevoir ce vote délibératif qui renvoie à l'avis. Ici, le conseil doit donner l'avis. Par contre, le vote délibératif, le conseil doit donner le consentement qui lie toujours le supérieur. Maintenant, au niveau du chapitre général, le chapitre général décide aussi, suite au débat capitulaire. Suite au débat capitulaire, à la fin, le chapitre doit décider. C'est pourquoi au niveau du chapitre général, il y a plusieurs niveaux de vote. Il y a le vote à la majorité absolue, il y a le vote à la majorité simple. Donc, et lorsque la décision est prise, comme on l'a dit dans le canon évoqué plus haut, les autres sont seulement tenus d'obéir à cette norme qui a été arrêtée. C'est pourquoi les actes capitulaires ont force de droit, parce que le chapitre général étant l'instance suprême de décision de la congrégation, tout le monde doit se plier aux décisions qui ont été prises. Même le supérieur général qui a été voté, il n'est pas dispensé, mais malheureusement, on voit que les supérieurs, une fois notés, il met de côté les actes certains points des actes capitulaires, comme quoi le chapitre n'était pas assez intelligent pour décider ainsi. Ça, c'est courant aussi.
Alors, so Sister was speaking about consultation, not so, and she said that when a council advises a superior, there can be a deliberative vote and a consultative vote. And when it is a consultative vote, I think the superior is not bound by it, if that's what I understood. And then when it's a deliberative vote, the superior is bound by the decision. And that also goes all the way to the general chapter and ways in which the superior general elected by a general chapter is supposed to submit to the decisions of the chapter. The superior is not above those decisions taken by the chapter at the end of the day.
Il y avait une dernière question là.
Rapidement, ma sœur.
Oui, la synodalité, la jeunesse. Bon, j'avoue que j'étais un peu perdue sur cette question-là, parce qu'elle a un lien étroit avec la formation des jeunes. Ici, généralement, comme je travaille aussi dans la formation à divers niveaux, et surtout à l'inter-noviciat, j'aime dire aux jeunes que la formation est une proposition nouvelle. Quand on apporte aux jeunes qui désirent commencer cette expérience nouvelle. Et il y a deux choses, soit tu adhères, soit tu n'adhères pas. Il y a une seule question qui modifie l'avancement ou pas. Le candidat est-il idoine pour la vie consacrée? Il est admis. Le candidat n'est pas idoine, il est conseillé de le réorienter. C'est tout. C'est pour dire quoi? Ça, c'est le premier niveau, niveau vraiment initial. À un autre niveau, il est dit que, là, parlant du renouvellement des vœux, non, ou bien je reste au niveau initial là, qui fait problème. Ici, je ne saurais pas dire vraiment quelque chose de... Pour moi, la formation, on l'apprend ou on ne l'apprend pas. C'est tout. Donc dire après qu'on est blessé parce qu'on n'a pas été admis, il faut s'interroger soi-même. Est-ce qu'on a été docile? Voilà, c'est le mot qu'on utilise. Le candidat a-t-il été docile à la formation ou il n'a pas été docile? Et parce que la question à la fin, le candidat est idoine ou il n'est pas idoine. Et à ce niveau, qu'est-ce que les supérieurs majeurs ou je ne sais pas. Pour moi, il est question de donner une formation adéquate aux jeunes et je demande aux jeunes seulement de se laisser former. Et généralement, on prend l'image de l'argile, non, qui est entre les mains du potier. Le formé doit se laisser former, donner la forme que le formateur donne. Et ça, il n'y a pas deux issues. Soit il se laisse moduler par la forme que le formateur lui donne, soit il ne se laisse pas modeler, il est renvoyé. C'est tout.
So, to the question regarding young girls being dismissed from religious life or dropping out of the formation process, she says that the only question when it comes to formation is a candidate ideal for religious life or not? At the end of the day, if the candidate is ideal, the candidate moves on. If not, the candidate is reoriented. And the question of people being hurt in the formation process, at the end of the day, it might have to do with expectations that people have in connection to the formation process. And the question is, did they allow themselves to be molded in the course of that formation, or were there some resistances at the end of the day that someone shouldn't be allowed to proceed just because people are worried about the person being hurt at the end of the day? It has to be, is this a candidate that is good for religious life or not? That should be the only thing that's taken into account. Now, quickly, Sister Anne, the food is getting cold as we spend time here, so let's do it very briefly, please. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The first question was about how synodality could be implemented among the formees so that they are able to have full participation and decision-making on their journey of formation. It is very possible because the formator is not meant to dictate or to be at the giving point, but to facilitate the formation of the formees, to listen deeply on what the Spirit is telling them so that they are able to make the right choices for what they expect, and also to purify their intentions by understanding what the Spirit is asking of them. And that's why I brought in the idea of Baraza model, where you sit to discern together. The formator is only a companion on the journey, so that discernment is around dialogue, understanding, listening, and a lot of avoidance of judgment, because the formee is coming from somewhere, is going somewhere, so that the Spirit is the one that is guiding, where the formee will be able to understand the mission of Christ for her charism, both for the institute and for the personal charism. The other one was these persons whose perspective of credentials does not help. They keep underlooking others who may not be of their same level of understanding about things or the skills they have acquired. Here, I think it's more of personality or the ego that has not been formed, and that would mean the need for an ongoing formation so that the person is able to internalize the call of God and the mission of God in her life and be able to form the ego or the personality that could be interfering with what God desires of that particular sister or religious. That means we are not looking for a balance as such. We are looking for skills that serve the effectiveness of sharing the gospel values that a religious remains a witness and like an instrument of God's mission. The other question was, how do we balance between the formation of those coming from the urban and those coming from the rural? And probably those coming from the urban areas may not understand the Ubuntu model, the Barasa model, or the culture values of the Africa. These values are not strange. They are also gospel values. We are only proposing a model that is more understood. And once this model is initiated to these for me, becomes a uniting factor, because each for me is coming from diverse perspectives of life. So what we are looking for is a unifying factor that links every person coming from their backgrounds, but towards only one mission, the mission of Christ, the mission of the church. So it's only a model to help the formator to facilitate a better understanding and can be initiated to them. They are always very receptive when they are focused on what they want. And so the process of formation is to unite all of them so that when we see a sister, we may not be able to look at her from urban or from rural, but we are seeing a witness of the gospel values.
Sister, quickly. Yeah.
That's what I would propose, that is only a model to facilitate the conversion process and the formation process. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Sister Jacinta is very good at summarizing. She's going to do that for us. Yeah.
Okay. So the first question was, do we need to evangelize canon law because hierarchy and synodality seems to be mutually exclusive? Well, I would rather talk of domesticating canon law. What do I mean? What the reasons that have been given claiming that canon law actually is not meeting the needs of synodality. One of them is there is no participation, especially of the laity. And most of the norms require simply consultative vote, and this consultative vote is never taken seriously. And so the proposal is, let us have more deliberative vote other than simply consultative vote. But I ask myself, do we also consider the consequences of deliberative vote? Because deliberative vote can be equally destructive. Just as we may have tyranny of the minority, it's also very easy to have tyranny of the majority. One simple example, which happened in one of the institutes, where the council must give deliberative vote for the superior to admit a member to renewal of vows. And the council members, for whatever reason, refuse to give deliberative vote, and vows are expiring. It means if this sister's vows expire, then she ceases to be a religious. And the superior cannot act because the superior needs a deliberative vote of the council in order to act. So that is just one example, and there are quite a number where deliberative vote can be equally destructive or may not produce the desired outcome. And the reason as to why the church normally require more consultative vote in a number of cases is because someone must take responsibility, because some of the decision touches on human status, one's life. So if one is making that decision, one must be ready to take up responsibility. So if one who is in charge gets simply consultative vote, the person has to take a responsibility, and when there is any damage, then someone is held accountable. A decision that is made by a group, it's very difficult to hold everyone accountable. Because in any law, someone, if it has to lead to prosecution, someone has to be prosecuted. And this is always a decision maker, even in state law. Now, having said that, consultative vote seems not to be producing the required outcome. That is very true. But where is the problem? One of the problems is that most of the norms are actually general. And in the Code of Canon Law, we find most of the normative norms. For you to implement, you need procedural norms. Now, procedural norms are never in the Code of Canon Law except in the book on processes, where we are having penalties. These procedural norms are left to particular law. Particular law are those ones that are promulgated in the dioceses, particular churches, and laws, special norms, which are in the institutes. The challenge is these procedural norms don't exist in most instances. So when you don't have guidelines, those who are in authority, they become creative. When you are creative, you either decide to act or you don't act. So one way, whether we call it evangelizing canon law, we really need procedural norms in place to effectively implement what is given in the Code of Canon Law. All those responsibilities that are given to the lay faithful, if there are no guidelines on how to assign who is to be responsible and even how to determine how this is done, they'll remain in books. And so it is very easy for canon law to be reviewed and it still remains in the books. So what we need are procedural norms. We are supposed to be advocating for that at particular church level and at institutes level to implement what we have in the Code of Canon Law. The second thing is, we are saying that the Code of Canon Law actually is not in harmony with the synodal church. But how much of the Code of Canon Law has been implemented? So are we saying we need to review because it is not working or it has not been implemented? So in as much as we are saying there are certain norms that may need review, we are supposed to be demanding more implementation of what is already there. Advice, okay, giants in theory and dwarfs in practice, pseudo-formation, conformity. Now, the problem in formation today as to why we may not have full formation taking place is the manner in which we form the young generation. What we used to do in the past cannot work today because of technology. Today, it's not one formator. One who is formally assigned is forming, but there are so many other formators because they are learning a lot from the media. So what is needed is to let them understand the why of anything that we do. They don't, no longer works. So if we take our constitution and we tell them this is what the constitution expects of you, this is what you are not expected to do, if you don't tell them the why and they internalize the why, you will get the outcome that you are talking about. Youths who don't accept. It's not that they don't accept, they are not convinced. And for them to be convinced, they must know the why and internalize the why we do what we do. Or why our constitution says we should do this and we should not do this. If we are talking about the vows, why do we leave these 3 vows? They need to internalize that and be convinced they will leave it. But if it is simply the church requires it, it will not dig deep. And what you are not convinced of, you cannot put into practice. That is the problem when we have mere instruction, because it goes to in the intellect and it doesn't reach the will, where change takes place.
Thank you, sister.
Finally, we are in the
30 seconds.
The last question.
30 seconds.
Institutional patriarchy formation and women participation. I said that institutional, we have systemic patriarchy being perpetuated in our institutions, including religion, mass media. They have places of work. So in religion, if we keep on teaching that the fall of a man was because of the woman, and Professor Kure brought it out quite clearly, that is what they will internalize. And then at another time we will tell them, now we are talking about equality, fundamental equality. It confuses them. Another confusion is, and let me give another example of religious institute again. In the formation, we tell these candidates what is expected of them. Then we send them out for mission experience. And when they go to the communities, they find something that is totally different from what they were taught in the formation. When they come back to the formation, the only thing they bring back is, these things you are taught in formation, when you go to the communities, forget about them. So that is... Okay.
We are going to fight after this if you continue now.
So that is about institutional patriarchy. Now, how can women come in to help them? Women will come in to help them. Oh, it's like I'm muted.
Someone muted you.
Okay. It's working, okay.
She was going to accuse me of patriarchy if... so, continue.
Yeah, so our women, because we are saying that these women are with the children most of the time, the people that need to be first enlightened are women. And if they are enlightened, they will start doing something, not 100%. And these young ones who are passed through their hands, if they go through their education and they meet different levels, where we are deconstructing the problem of this systemic hierarchy, gradually we will be able to have some significant change. So it is not a one-day activity, it's a process, and it's a lifelong process. That's what I would say in summary. We can continue conversation outside because time is up, and the moderator is not happy now.
At all. I'm not happy at all. Please join me in thanking all our three presenters, please. Thank you very much, really. Thank you to all three of you. And thank you to all present for your patience in engaging with our presenters. So we are going to go for lunch now. And hopefully after lunch, you have some time to rest before we resume at 3 p.m. To make things easier, we are just going to say the grace before meal now, in faith and hope that there will actually be food waiting for us out there when we get there. And that way, when you get there, you just help yourself and then you eat. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, together, bless us, O Lord, in these your gifts, which we are about to receive from your goodness, through Christ our Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Enjoy your meal. Thank you.
Between the clergy and laity, number 33, and in fact, women and other laity were made to feel, quote, that their participation in the synod process was unwelcome, number 38. The synod is over, but these sad realities are not over. As Sister Jacinta wrote in the Hakima Review, Shortly after last year's Women's Theological Meeting, so the issue came out in March 2024, women theologians are raising their voices on the most important existential issues the church faces. They make their own arguments as scholars with confidence and authority. And there were plenty of examples of that, even from young women theologians who were recently recipients of their theology degrees. She said, they are ready to listen and learn from one another as a new way of doing theology, where collaboration and conversation are preferred. However, she continued, women often receive no credit for their work and limited opportunities, of which there was a lot of testimony from the women that spoke last year, the young women struggling to find teaching positions or respect for their opinions if they're working in a bishop's office, and so on and so on. There were a lot of examples. Furthermore, as Sister Osho actually raised in the form of a question yesterday, women are often disparaged, blocked, and even punished for success. You gave the example, Sister Florence, of a woman department head, I think, in your institution, and it was so the male members of the department were actually trying to make her fail. And that was echoed by things that I heard from other people yesterday in informal conversation. I'm happy to say that these two conferences, at least, are testimony that that is not happening at Hakima University College, or certainly that it's not a widespread reality. So that's another reason that I'm grateful to be here and offer my respect for the organizers of these conferences. Let me go back a few decades in the United States and illustrate for you that these situations occur everywhere. They're not just limited to this continent. But this is coming from my own experience as a younger professor. And Sister Mombi outed me yesterday when she said that I've been teaching for 4 decades. It's actually closer to 5 decades. So really, it's across a generation. So on the one level, I want to show that we all have been through similar things, but also that was a long time ago, and things have really changed in my university. And I'm confident that they will here too in Kenya and other countries from which you all come. So I went to the University of Chicago for my doctorate. It was right after Vatican II. There were a lot of Catholics. It was 50% Catholic and a lot of Jesuit priests. So I had many Jesuit priests for my friends, among my classmates, and later my husband and I, socialized and had them over for dinner and went around to their houses and so on. So there were close relationships among all the students. But still, I was the only woman in my entering class, which was in systematic theology. After the doctoral program, again, I was really fortunate at the hands of the Jesuits. I was offered a job at Boston College, a Jesuit school, before I even finished all of my doctoral work. I was still working on my dissertation. And the chair at the time was a wonderful Jesuit, still alive, called Robert Daly, Bob Daly, whom Father Marcel knows very well. And he always supported me and tried to help me plan my schedule so I would have room for research, funded my trips to conferences and so on. But that very fact made it clear that even his good intentions and the fair structures that were in place in the department and the university were not enough to guarantee true solidarity on the part of all the other faculty, or a truly new culture that makes it possible for women to succeed. So kind of below the surface, we still had the issue that others have talked about, in which senior faculty will look around and they're looking for candidates from within the pool of theologians to serve in a role or write an article, and somehow they look over the heads of the women, and it's the men that tend to get favored and picked. Not through deliberate intention to exclude women, but because somehow women just never seem quite as credible. A second thing is that when I came up for tenure, it was clear that some people, including the most senior member of the ethics field, that was my field at the time, really didn't regard women candidates as equally credible to male candidates. And this senior person was advocating for a male candidate for tenure to receive tenure and against. We could both have received it, but he only advocated for the male and not for me. Luckily, there were two other members of the department who came to my defense, and I did, as you can see, receive tenure and stayed at Boston College. But even after this, and I was beginning to write, women were invited to write on women's issues. So I started out in ecumenical Catholic Protestant ethics, in fundamental moral theology, as we would call it today, and in bioethics. What is my main area now? It's gender, and women, family, and gender identities and relationships. Why? Because at the time that I started out, women were considered credible on a specific subset of women's issues: sex, gender, marriage, and family. So most of my invitations to write articles were in those areas. I came to really love that area. I'm still working in it. But it was a choice that happened fortuitously, not through my design. And of course, all throughout my career, and I have to say that this is true even now, which will lead me to a final point, but another thing throughout my career is that women always have a double shift. Married women have it, married women with families especially, but I think religious sisters as well are expected to do what we think of as domestic and sort of interpersonal responsibility tasks or assignments, sometimes assignments and sometimes just a relational responsibility, in a way that men are not. So women go home and cook dinner and do the wash. Why am I up at midnight folding laundry and my husband and 4 sons are in bed? Now I only have 2 sons still living at home and a grandson. But I'm still doing the wash at midnight. Okay, why? I'm a feminist theologian. What's going on here? And that's my final point. We internalize it too, not just the men. So we're carrying forward our own problems in a way while still struggling against them. So we have to keep that up. And I have to say, as time went on at Boston College, things began to change because the younger men became more involved in the family. So it was such a gift one day when one of my colleagues in ethics, Steve Pope, said, I'm sorry I can't go to that meeting, I have to pick up the kids at childcare, which I had never had the nerve to say, right? But once a male had broken the ice, then that became a sort of legitimate item on the table of the academic, I don't know, milieu. So back to 2025. The synod is over, but the church still faces very similar challenges to these of recognizing who is truly an ecclesial leader and in what women's leadership roles consist. So we need solidarity to really complete the job. As Pope John Paul II defined it, solidarity is commitment to the good of all and of each individual because we are really responsible for all. That's from Solicitudo Rei Socialis, number 38. It's a beautiful ideal, right? But it's not easy to achieve it because solidarity amounts to a real sense of one's oneness with other people, of empathy, sharing, a kind of realization that we're all in this together. We're not just here to compete. In reality, this makes solidarity a very tough mandate. We talk about it, it's great, we endorse it, we need it, we don't do it, or it's very hard to do it. And for its fulfillment, Pope Francis can't just do it at a synod. He relies on the local churches and the local communities. So that's all of us, men, women, and everyone. In an address in Ireland last year, Agbonkiagmege Arobator, familiar to all of you probably because he was a former principal here at Hakima College, and he was a participant in the synod, insisted the very idea of solidarity and collaboration entails accepting that no one person has all the answers. That's especially true, he said, in a very diverse church with women speaking in their own right, in their own voices. As Arobator sees it, solidarity is the option we make to journey with others. So how can we make that option a reality? That's the next question. And I have 3 answers to this I'll try to cover pretty quickly. For the first one, I'm going to refer back to a question that Father Marcel asked Suki Naidawa yesterday about the responsibility of administration and academic leadership. You were talking specifically about sexual abuse, but I'm talking more generally about women's status and respect for women. And she said, the leadership needs to make it a priority for resources. We also have to recognize the magnitude of the problem. We need to step up, or the administration needs to, the leadership needs to step up and support women who are targeted. And above all, don't isolate women, like one woman in a department. That's tough, okay? So a critical mass of women is always better. And of course, we always oppose victim shaming and victim blaming, even when it's not quite outright. Let's see. So one thing I'll just add to that, and I think Suki would probably agree, and it is this, and Father Marcel already might be worried about this, which is when the leadership does step up, that doesn't mean they're immune from backlash. So there can still be, and often is, resistance even to the leadership and non-compliance. And non-compliance can take a lot of forms, less and more direct. So a sort of indirect or passive compliance, I'll say, would be those who don't really resist or target women, but they also don't reach out and try to help. They're not going to create a big stir, but they're not really comfortable. Something that's a little bit more aggressive is tacit non-compliance. That's the people who say things like, well, she's really not, I don't mind having a woman in this role, but she's obviously not fully qualified, or she didn't really make the right decision in this particular instance. And then finally, there's direct opposition. We need to get rid of that president. We need another leader. This leadership is very weak. Or we need to step in and get the faculty senate together and vote for another policy and overturn the one that we have. So all of these dynamics can go on even when leadership is trying to step forward. A second line of attack against this bureaucratic, dominating, patriarchal system would be the action of women themselves. The first thing is women's education, which women can't accomplish alone, but is still an undertaking of women. The more educated women that there are around, the more confidence people will learn to have in women's abilities, leadership, and qualifications. That's what I've really seen happen in the U.S. After Vatican II, all kinds of lay women were attracted to theological studies, and the more we kind of flooded the market, the more of us tended to get hired, and then more got hired, and then more were fulfilling offices in professional societies, and were chairs of departments, and were promoted to full professor, and so on. So education is really a help. Not just in educational work, but in every line in which women's equality is at stake. But a second thing is women's organization for resistance. And it's got to be broad-based. So again, not limited to within the Catholic Church, although that's very, very important, but reaching across social groups, interreligious, organizational, because it's a broad social problem. Even the Catholic inequality of women within the ecclesial structures wasn't just generated by Catholics. Okay, it's participation in a larger set of structures that I would say are very harmful. Harmful to men, not just to women. You know, it's also limiting what men can do. There are certain things that are off limits. I remember at last year's conference, Sister Teresa Okure at the end brought in, like, I don't know, 6 young people, and they all had to talk about something that in their own cultural tradition was forbidden or prescribed for boys or for girls. And they all offered various things, and then she looked at the rest of us and said, would you still endorse that today if you were able to choose? And of course, they were all things that we thought were problematic. So widespread resistance is needed, and women's activism, of which many of the women here present are leaders. Many people are leaders of women's groups. And that's super valuable. Never minimize that. And also, don't wait for approval from the existing authorities, but women have to take their own lead. And then the final thing, and I'll just mention this and not elaborate, but it's economics. So it's not enough to target discrimination just by targeting the instances of discrimination. Like, what enables a culture that gets away with minimizing and excluding women? Okay, it's women's lack of social power. And education is one route to that, but also the economy is another. Sister Caroline was telling me about a project that she has with women cassava farmers to enhance their level of farming, enhance their economic power, enhance their status, and reduce domestic violence. All of these things are part of one picture. I read recently an article, it was a report on the country of Kenya and violence against women. And half of the report was on the direct causes of violence, but the first part was on land reform, or reform of rights to land, and looking at the discrepancies among constitutional law, customary traditions, and then sort of local cultures to show how all of this fits. Thank you very much. Okay, so in conclusion, let's see. So in conclusion, I want to go back to the conference that we're at and what a gift it is in this respect. So the women's theological conferences for African women lead toward more solidarity in at least 4 ways. 1, among women theologians themselves who share their challenges and aspirations. 2, among women theologians and the scholars of Hekima, where solidarity is being witnessed and strengthened among women and men. 3rd, among women theologians and the larger church, most immediately the church in Africa, where women are striving for recognition. And then finally, among African women theologians and women theologians worldwide, including myself, in what my friend Sister Mumbi has called a global sisterhood. And I would be happy to consider that our male supporters are honorary members of that sisterhood. So if synodality and solidarity do begin to change all of these unfortunate relations and even the church itself, then what would we see? And my answer is that women's power to carry the gospel into church and the world would not be created because it already exists. It would be recognized, it would be unleashed, and it would be magnified. Because women already have vitality, women are already exercising leadership, and we are here to make sure that those changes continue and that the role and the prominence of women continue to increase. So thank you for allowing me to be among you as a guest, and also to Hakima College for hosting these two conferences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kay. Please join me in thanking her once again with another round of applause. Yeah. She mentioned that all the male partners are part of that sisterhood. I hope Sister Mumbi heard and will no longer resist my attempts to join Watawa Wata. Now, we are going to listen now to Sister Dr. Anne Arabome. Sister Arabome is a member of the Sisters of Social Service in Los Angeles, California. She is a founder and co-director of Sophia Institute for Theological Studies and Spiritual Formation in Namibia. She has previously served as the Associate Director of the Faber Center for Ignatian Spirituality at Marquette University. She holds a PhD in Systematic Theology from the University of Roehampton in the UK, and a Doctor of Ministry in Spirituality from the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. There's a lot more you can learn about her by reading her short biography in the program booklet. She's going to speak to us today about synodal leadership, women at the forefront of ecclesial renewal. You are welcome, Dr. Arabome. So she'll be speaking to us online, please.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. It is a wonderful privilege, dear friends and colleagues, to join you from Los Angeles, California, where the time is currently 5:37 a.m. in the morning. So I would like to thank Hekima University College and the organizers of this African Women Theologians Conference for the invitation to offer some reflections on the topic of synodal leadership, women at the forefront of ecclesial renewal. I am equally grateful to Hekima for accommodating my need to participate virtually due to an unexpected change in my schedule. So thank you very much. In this abridged version of my longer paper, I would like to reflect on the evolving role of women in the life, mission, and leadership of the Church in the context of synodality and emerging ecclesiologies of the 21st century. At the onset, it is worth noting that when it comes to gifts of the leadership of African women, our pedigree is stellar, even if it counts as the proverbial best kept secret that is ignored, undermined, or overlooked. Who could ignore African women who are theological stalwarts in their own rights, some of whom are present at this August gathering, several of whom have gone to their eternal reward? So it is fitting to honor their legacy and acknowledge their contribution to the development, progress, and growth of the Church in Africa. To its credit, the Synod on Synodality 2021 to 2024 has repositioned the question of the leadership of women at the forefront of ecclesial renewal. From its onset, the Synod, which included a record number of women delegates, did not dissimulate or circumvent the challenges confronting women in their quest to be recognized as synodal leaders, untrammeled by the institutional roadblocks that prevent them from exercising their synodal leadership. So let me begin by affirming a fundamental truth. A fundamental truth. What is the theological foundation of ecclesial belonging, participation, and leadership? What is it? The short answer is baptism. Baptism, in what was possibly one of the most poignant proclamations of the synod. The final document states that, quote, "There is nothing higher than this baptismal dignity, equally bestowed upon each person, through which we are invited to clothe ourselves with Christ and be grafted onto him like branches of the one vine." End of quote. And that's number 21. It is on this firm foundation that the ecclesial belonging, participation, and leadership of the people of God rests. This is where it rests. Furthermore, the final document declares that, quote, "By virtue of baptism, women and men have equal dignity as members of the people of God." End of quote. And that's number 60. Truth be told, notwithstanding this strong rhetoric of baptismal equality, we are a divided church. We are a divided church where the gender of a Christian determines the level of access that she has to exercise leadership and ministry. The synod, women continue to encounter obstacles in obtaining a fuller recognition of their charisms, vocation, and place in all the various areas of the church's life. This is to the detriment of serving the church's shared mission. The candor and forthright words are not enough. As the adage goes, action must speak louder than words when addressing women's leadership in a synodal church. So, what is the path towards the ecclesial leadership of women and ecclesial renewal in a synodal church? I would like to outline 3 parts that could lead to the concrete realization of the ecclesial leadership of women and ecclesial renewal in a synodal church. In addition to the principle of baptismal dignity, which I mentioned, the second most important principle in achieving this vision is the principle of inclusion. The principle of inclusion. In fact, inclusion is the other side of the coin of baptismal dignity. The key elements of synodality, namely participation, communion, and mission, are rooted on the notion of inclusion. They are rooted on the notion of inclusion. So this principle brooks no half measure. One is either included or not included. There cannot be partial inclusion. In fact, the latter constitutes a form of exclusion. The first path: admit reality and act in consequence. We know already that women make up the majority of churchgoers and are often the first witnesses to the faith in families. There are women who hold positions of authority and are leaders of their communities. This is from the final document, number 60. The examples that the Synod enumerates of this reality are examples of best and successful practices in any organization or institution. It is a virtue not only to recognize and reward best and successful practices, but also, more importantly, to replicate and promote such practices across the entirety of the organization. Thus, admitting the reality of women's creative, exemplary, and dedicated achievements at the forefront of ecclesial leadership and renewal constitutes a mandate to replicate such practices in every part of the church and in every local church. In the spirit, or in the true spirit of Catholicity, such practices should become the norm everywhere in the church. The second path: practice what we preach. That's easy, right? Practice what we preach. Practicing what the church teaches is a scriptural counsel, an ethical necessity, and a synodal aspiration. As the Synod on Synodality declares, quote, "This assembly asks for full implementation of all the opportunities already provided for in canon law with regard to the role of women, particularly in those places where they remain underutilized." And end of quote. And this is number 60. There is a plethora of opportunities for women to exercise leadership in the Synodal Church. In my estimation, Pope Francis of blessed memory gave us the best and the most impactful examples. With his trademark gospel boldness, Pope Francis ruptured the glass ceiling at the Vatican by appointing women to leadership roles in areas that were traditionally dominated by the male hierarchy. His reform of the Roman Curia was inspired by the Apostolic Constitution, Predicate Evangelium 2022. By implementing this reform, Francis opened the door for lay people, including women, to lead Vatican departments in roles previously reserved for bishops and cardinals. In short, Pope Francis practiced what he preached and continued to perfect his practice until his death. So, what does Francis's prophetic actions teach us? What does it teach us? Oftentimes, we consider the structural reforms needed to ensure the participation of women in ecclesial leadership as not an aspiration. We don't think it's something that we can realize. It is not. His examples proved it. Additionally, frequently, the hierarchy, that is clergy and bishops, appeal to the Vatican to justify their unwillingness to grant access to women to occupy leadership and governance roles in dioceses and parishes. If it happens at the level of the Roman Curia, as the example of Pope Francis and Pope Leo show, such instances should afford clergy and bishops the license, warrant, and mandate to act accordingly. I believe that there is now substantial precedence in practice to justify the leadership of women as an ordinary way of proceeding in a synodal church. The third and final path entails a personal and communal conversion. At the heart of synodality is conversion. The locus of this conversion is the relationship between women and men in the church. Precisely, according to the final document, quote, the need for conversion certainly concerns the relations between men and women, end of quote, and that's number 52. So if women's roles are to be entrenched in the life and mission of the church, a fundamental shift in mindset would be required. That is a synodal conversion that calls each person to enlarge the space of their heart. And that's from the final document 110. Synodal leadership is not gendered. It thrives on service. It is nurtured by relationality. It is not about power, but about compassion, solidarity, and shared humanity. So rather than look to gender to separate leaders from followers, it bears noting that the gifts, wisdom, and charism that the Holy Spirit distributes with extraordinary extravagance and abundance are more reliable markers of ecclesial leadership in which there's neither male nor female, Galatians 3:28. Only baptized women and men who share equal dignity by virtue of their baptism in Christ and bear equal responsibility in shaping the life and mission of the church. To conclude this abridged presentation, I want to repeat the prophetic words of Pope Francis in his prayer intentions for February 2022. He asked, what would the church be without religious sisters and consecrated lay women? The church cannot be understood without them. So we can say the same about synodality. Synodality does not make sense without women. The final document states emphatically there is no reason or impediment that should prevent women from carrying out leadership roles in the church. What comes from the Holy Spirit cannot be stopped. So as a woman in the church, as a woman in Africa, synodality invites us as women in Africa to take our rightful place in the church. Synodality offers us the opportunity to claim, affirm, and celebrate our fundamental equality and dignity as baptized Christian faithful. To quote an African proverb, when sleeping women wake, mountains move. Synodality summons us to wake up, to be aware of our giftedness, beauty, and strength as African women, and to become active teachers of synodality and leaders at the forefront of ecclesial renewal in the church. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arabome, and thank you in a special way for waking up so early to be able to be with us at this time. Our third and final speaker for this session is Sister Dr. Florence Adetun Osho. Sister Osho is a member of the congregation of the Sisters of the Eucharistic Heart of Jesus. She obtained a licentiate in missiology at the Pontifical Urban University, Rome, and another in spiritual theology from the Pontifical Gregorian University in the same city. She also a doctorate in missiology from the Pontifical Urban University. She has taught at St. Augustine's Major Seminary, Jos, and St. Peter and Paul Major Seminary, Ibadan, Nigeria. I invite you to read more about Dr. Osho in the booklet, in the program booklet. So without further ado, I'm going to invite her to deliver her presentation on making synodality the evangelical path in the service of God's kingdom, reimagine and revitalize the consecrated women's way of life. Welcome, Dr. Osho. Thank you.
Greetings to everyone here present at this conference, physically and virtually. And I want to express my gratitude to the organizers of this conference and to you all for having me here this evening. Never mind what is written in the booklets, it has been modified, and my topic is revitalizing our identity as consecrated women in the spirit of synodality. So my arguments in this is in view of the happenings in the consecrated life today generally. And well, I just felt, well, there's so much happening, and looking at how the synodal process can invite consecrated women to reimagine, to revitalize, their way of life in a synodal church. And how do we begin, to live this synodality in our religious communities, in order to heal the wounds that have been inflicted on the consecrated life? So to do this, I am proposing the synodal process of 3 elements that is found in the synodal process, and I'm presenting conversion, reconciliation, and peace as a way of beginning to live the synodality in our communities, so that we can now expand this to the general church. So we have to begin with service, like beginning from home in order to go outside. And in my introduction, I checked on what it means to revitalize, which means giving new life or vitality. It involves renewing, restoring, or restructuring something that has been weakened. It's about breathing new life into something in order to make it vibrant and enhance its overall quality values. So, why do we revitalize? Why revitalizing our identity? Has something happened to our identity? Has it been dented? Has it been damaged? Last week, back in my country, I got an image of the consecrated life that was so negative, that was so shameful, that presented the consecrated life as a dented life. From a nun, on Facebook, and it was going viral, and it was generating so much problems and issues and debates, in different platforms in my country. And that tells me that we must acknowledge that the consecrated life in Africa and in Nigeria, to be more precise, speaking from my own point of view, where I come from, is currently beset by so many challenges that are corroding and rocking the very essence of what we call the consecrated life, the existence of this life, the call to witness to the love of Christ in poverty, chastity, obedience, which is lived in the community, and for the mission to evangelize as Christ did. Now, looking at our identity, as a consecrated person, from Lumen Gentium, it's highlighted that evangelical counsels of the consecrated life is a divine gift, which the church received from her Lord. It is not defined by the vows, nor by the habits that we wear, nor the missions that we carried out, but rather by its peculiar relationship with Christ. Hence, it becomes essential to define or redefine and revitalize this life, because it is a divine gift and it has to be curated, it has to be cared for, it has to be cherished, and it is distinct. Yes, this life is very essential to the life of the church. Now, this life that is a gift is also being threatened by so many new challenges as we have, in the 21st centuries. So there are so many challenges that's facing or besetting the consecrated life today. And what are these challenges? There are many, but I'm just going to list some, which we've seen this morning from the presenters that spoke earlier on today. The first one I am going to actually point out is a division based on ethnicism, tribalism, nepotism, cliquism, and all the ism you can find in the world. And we know that division is actually contrary to what we call synodality. So this is a problem in many religious communities today. We have it happening among us in our different communities. This is my tribal sister, she's my language sister, she's my village sister, she speaks the same language, she's my cousin, she's my niece, we have it happening in the community life, in the communities we have today. So this is a problem, and which has made some members to be marginalized and to be victimized in the communities. If there is division, the religious community cannot give credible witness. So where there is division among us, what witness are we giving to the world? And the second challenge that I find in the religious life also today is power tussle. Power tussle is one big problem, ripping religious communities apart. It seems being in power, as superior or whatever in leadership role, means that you can do whatever you like and whatever you wish. No moral juridical norms apply to you as a leader. So this seems to be the main reason why so many people or many religious want to be in leadership. Many consecrated women want to be the superior at all costs. What we cannot do, or what can we not do in order to come into power, to make sure that we get there? In our general chapters, the human element seems to have overshadowed the divine elements. Sister Sabine this morning was talking about the general chapter as a space for synodality. Fine, beautiful. But we are not also looking at the general chapters as a place for playing politics, because we do a lot of politicking also at the chapters. It goes on. So we have driven out the role of the Holy Spirit from our general chapters, and then we have brought in the human element into this. Then another problem I've identified here is individualism as against community life. This is manifested in so many ways, such as addiction to social media. And of course, we know that individualism is also opposed to solidarity. So addiction to social media. Due to technological advancements, there is a growing tendency among consecrated women towards individualistic life. The world begins and ends in our room. We have a little gadget called the cell phone. We have everything inside. We can watch movie inside from it. We can order for meals. We can do all sorts of things through this means. We have a community there because we are always talking to somebody. We have a community online that we are talking to. Therefore, the physical community around us doesn't matter anymore. So, and then also there is this exaggerated sense of entitlement. Using work and personal engagement as a means of escaping from prayers and even interactions with others in the community, even in a relaxed manner. Come into the community room. Let's watch a movie together. Let's play some games together. But no, some of us will prefer to remain in our room. I think Sister Anne was making reference to that this earlier on today, you know, in what she was talking about. And then there's this new thing coming into the religious communities, quest for miracles. We want to know about the future, about the destiny, what's going to happen. And I've been hearing stories of consecrated women going to healers, going to prophets who can tell them what's going to happen to them in the future. And some even going to lay people to lay hands on them and pray for them and invoke some blessings on them. It's something very crazy. I mean, it's difficult to understand what is bringing all this. And then the craze for survival, which trades again over compassion for the poor in our apostolate. It seems many of our apostolates are overly motivated by financial gain to the detriment of the poor. Sister Anne also mentioned that. And somebody was disputing that or questioning that. But we know that these apostolates were actually instituted for the poor. But we know that our schools, our hospitals have become so expensive that the poor people, if they're not sponsored, cannot receive the services from our hospitals or from our schools. Our schools are for rich people, and no longer they're beyond the reach of the poor people. And again, we have crisis of identity. This is a problem which must be tackled within the religious life itself. This problem is capable of destroying the concerned religious and bringing in a lot of problems within the religious communities. And finally, infidelity to the vows. Some have designed the living out of these vows for their own conveniences outside the common understanding of what the vows of poverty as sharing, the vow of chastity as a total self-giving, and the vow of obedience as giving up of one's will for God's will. So all these negative vibes make the consecrated life lose much of its values for, countering this, for combating this, for eliminating this, for healing this. And I'm proposing here conversion, reconciliation, and peace. So if we can do this in our community, I think we'll be able to kind of eliminate some of these problems and begin to live, the synodality beginning with ourselves in the community life, in order to restore, the communal life. Conversion, that is a reform, a return. All of the Christian life is already a process of ongoing conversion to Christ, so that every Christian becomes a version of Christ. And the same is applicable to us consecrated persons. Therefore, for us to continue to truly imitate Christ, we must go back to the roots, the very beginning. We must make a U-turn to the roots. So this call for conversion, a change of heart on the part of every consecrated person and every institute of consecrated life, to return to the core values, to the charisms of our founders, to the zeal that led me into the consecrated life. So every community of consecrated person must call their members to a life of discipline, self-control, and self-emptying. Individuals must make an intentional commitment to the interior life in the imitation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So the consecrated life must look back to the original spirit, to the life that must pay attention to the formation of everyone at all levels. And the second element proposed is reconciliation. There is a lot going on in our community life. When we live together in the community, we're bound to offend one another. There's bound to be misunderstandings, conflicts, and the like. But unresolved, unresolved conflicts is what we should be afraid of, because it's unhealthy in any community, be it religious or otherwise. So dialogue in the community is very vital, because through this, light is shown on so many things that, is dark instances. And the result of dialogue, we know, is understanding and reconciliation, openness, forgiveness, and reconciliation. And saying sorry, I am sorry, can end inner peace. But many of us find it difficult to say, I am sorry. So reconciliation makes the path to communion. When there is reconciliation, there is communion. And we know the part that communion plays in synodality, which is very vital to synodal process. And the third one is peace, which is not an absence of war. It is a state of being in somebody. And when you have peace in you, when you are at peace, this can generate to your environment and to the next person beside you. So, absence of this in the community for so many reasons, for lack of trust, fear, animosity, rivalry, backbiting, envy, jealousy, etc. That's what we find in some of the communities, religious communities. So when a person possesses inner peace, it will affect the external environment. So, when there is peace in any community, there will be communion, joy, and warmth. And such a community will become a synodal community. I quickly jump to my conclusion because I've been given the ticket for 5 minutes. Now, the fundamental response of the consecrated person is very operative in reimagining and creating a revitalized, consecrated way of life. The image of the consecrated woman's identity is a journey of self-rediscovery. The activity we carry out often defines us. The action we take defines us. As consecrated person, we must begin to live the synodality from within our religious community. Our life as consecrated women is an aroma of Christ, distinct follower of Christ. So when we talk about self-sustainability, this will lead us away from our identity. We don't have to be self-sustained because it takes us from our identity. We have been set apart and we cannot allow ourselves to be swept away by the ties of the contemporary societal ills. We must rise against every ill that combats the consecrated life and return to the original trust and spirit of this state of life. We must fight against this all struggle for power, because power is not might, and might is not wisdom, but wisdom is everything, and God is in everything. God is power, God is might, God is wisdom, and God is everything. So I believe in this insistence on a complete return to the gospel and being radically evangelical as indicated in the nomenclature of the life. There is need to restore Jesus to the consecrated life and restore the consecrated life to Jesus. And, so that can bring in, the Christocentric identity of the religious life. As we revitalize ourselves, we must also revitalize our mission in the church. Consecrated women in Africa have been proclaiming the good news in education, in healthcare, in all the activities we've been mentioning since we started here. But now we must go back or go beyond being service providers, because sometimes some of us are just service providers. So we must go beyond being service providers and become witnesses of Christ. We must be present where human suffering is, and at this point of fracture and crack. We must approach mission from the experience of our own poverty and our emptiness. We must meet others at their own points of need, and together we grow. Our mission then becomes the mission of the poor to the poor. Our mission focus must be on the small. The gospel metaphor of the mustard seed is a powerful image and tool to direct interventions. Local positive actions, although small, but insignificant at the beginning, could become the yeast in the dough of global possibility. In the spirit of synodality, our community life must be a working together. When we are able to build synodal communities of consecrated persons, then we can be sure to build a synodal church. The Christian life is, though, personal, but never individualistic. The value of the human person is overlooked, while the individualization is exaggerated. It is a me world, me world. I wish to end this paper with a summary of Pope Francis' Lenten message for this year, 2025. It says, let us consider the path we are taking to find the one that leads us to rediscover our profound relationship with God. Everyone must make a move, a change for the better. He must get rid of structures of sin and evil. In this year of hope, let us journey together, walking side by side, without shoving or stepping on others, without envy or hypocrisy, without leaving or excluding anyone. Our journey together may have been moments of difficulties and hardships, but we walk together in faith, hope, and love in order to revitalize our life of consecration. We will be able to revitalize our consecrated life when we see one another as companions, walking on the same journey, working on the same mission, working towards the same goal, working for the same Lord, working for the same core values, and reaching out to one another in the spirit of synodality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Osho. Thank you. Please join me in thanking our three presenters again. Thank you. Now, if you look at the program, you will see that we are slightly behind time, approximately 18 minutes behind time. But you will also notice that we had put the health break at 4. But I'll beg on you to be patient with us. We decided that because Dr. Arabome is online, it would be unfair to her to say, okay, we go for a health break, we enjoy our mandazi.
I know what you're saying, Lisa, and also my sister, because the issues that are emerging from the consecrated life are exactly the same in our lay organizations. But I just wanted to share a model of how the working together amongst women between consecrated life and lay women is so important in terms of the whole issue of women's empowerment. Let's not see each other as on the other side, but rather find a way in which we are both living the consecrated life in a different way. And I just want to give a short example. One of the young women that I'm mentoring came up with a vision, what she calls Friends of Sisters. And once a year during Women's Month, she says that sometimes lay women forget that sisters are women, you know. And so she has pampering, massage, flowers, you know, to let everybody know that you remain a human being, you know, not something. But I'm just encouraging us to work together as sisters and support each other, because the whole struggle for women's equality should not find us divided. You know, that we find our spaces so that when situations like that happen, we're praying for each other, we are each other's, we cover each other's back. Sorry, it's a comment, but it really touched me, and I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adebe. Thank you very much. Yes, sister.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation to the three of you. I think it's when Dr. Ann was talking, I've heard about it. We have been talking, many of the presenters have spoken about equality, and this equality is in our baptism. And Sister Ann, or Dr. Ann, still spoke about this equality in baptism. And is becoming clearer for me, because up to this moment, I have never looked at that equality to be equality in baptism. When women, we talk about equality with women, I have always looked at what we do. But it's becoming stronger and very clearer for me that this equality is in baptism. That is where I just want to echo what is happening in me, the learning and the insight and the deepening of, I think, is part of my faith and knowledge in as a theologian to be. Let me put it that way, which is giving me a lot of joy. I wanted just to say that, bring that out. And as Dr. Florence was talking about community life, it kept coming to my mind. And my question is, what causes us sometimes to be just so bitter? Because you meet sisters sometimes, you are wondering if these are people of God, if these are people who are called to incarnate Christ to others, people who are called to bring healing to others, and so on. So I just felt I should ask, since you have done that study to go deeper into it, what causes us, religious women, I may not talk about men because I don't live with them, what causes us to be so bitter sometimes and you don't understand from where it is coming from? Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Gisela. Another intervention?
Hello.
Okay, Sister.
Yes. The first statement is just an observation. Sister Anne was talking about women and men as full ecclesia partners. And I look around here, how many theologians do we have here who are men? And I'm asking, how do we pass this message to them? Then to Sister Anne and Sister Florence, what happens? It has to do with Sister's question also, but I'm very mild and nice. What happens when women do not support women? What happens when we do not celebrate ourselves? What happens when we are not able to appreciate ourselves because others cannot appreciate us? Others cannot help us unless we ourselves believe in ourselves to celebrate our giftedness and then talk about synodality with the church. Thank you.
Thank you. So there are already 2 questions for Dr. Osho. Questions for Dr. Arabome and Professor Cahill. There is a hand back there, Alex. Okay, start with Marcel, and then you can give the other microphone to.
Thank you very much to you all for your presentations, and it's always good to be able to listen to someone who begins their presentations praising and showing what others have said. So thank you very much, Professor Cahill. Shows that you have been listening to, and not even now, but also to what was even there last year. And then to you all. I have just a very quick observation. Professor Cahill, you propose women's organization for resistance, or should I say for interruption? And we have a good model, and I borrowed this from theologian Emmanuel Katongore in his book, where he actually speaks of you see the woman who washes Jesus' feet in the house of Simon the leper. And she enters the house and she was actually uninvited, should I say. And they are all asking, who is this woman who comes and washes the feet of this man? If he knew who she was. And you remember the words of Jesus, whenever the gospel is proclaimed, it will be in memory of her. The title of the book of Elizabeth Johnson. But how do you allow space for this interruption, for this resistance? So this is just one among very few who are able to do this. Many can't do that, interruption, or they would even be ostracized. And I say this because I think in line of having the idea that why should we be having a conversation here if we come and say the same thing anyway. So it's good that there's something new that interrupts. And then to Sister, I have a question to Sister Florence, Dr. Florence, and thank you very much for your presentation. Here I certainly teach in systematic theology, but I'm also in administration, and when I have some time I do some pastoral ministry. And I have been giving some retreats to sisters and some priests here. And I am often struck by the lack of joy that I see among many. And this is not only only among sisters. You also find it among some priests. And I pray that I don't age an unhappy man. I don't see why one would stay in this life unhappy. And actually you end up actually making other people unhappy. But that aside, maybe it's also good to give the other side of the coin. Are there also moments or some sisters we can bring out who are actually models of joy? Because I felt that was missing in the presentation. You dwelt on the negative side, but there are also many who inspire us. And I would like to hear their voices. Thank you very much.
So thank you. Yes, Sister at the back.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Sister Beatrice Marceline Ojuang of the Franciscan Sisters of St. Anna. My question goes to Sister Dr. Oso. First and foremost, I would like to applaud, in case there are any formators in this forum, for the great work they do in forming the young religious men and women. Sister, also, one of the challenges that you have shared with us that are affecting our religious, our consecrated life as women religious is the challenges regarding the use of social media. While being in the 21st century, we are experiencing a lot in terms of the industrial revolution, given the technology advancement at hand today. We find that today when a child grows right from birth, they have a lot of experience with the social media. Actually, today, the best way of mothers to keep their children or babies while tending to other chores is to let them play with all these gadgets, mobile phones, smartphones, iPads, laptops, to name them. This is one person or child that grows, matures, and develops into a young adult that finally joins the religious life. Now, to counteract this ideology, especially during the religious formation, my question to the Sister Doctor also is that how best can this counteraction be achieved in order that it is instilled in the young religious that social media is not the only best way to either spend our leisure time or to best spend our time. In other words, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, the three presenters. That was beautiful. And you've made my presentation tomorrow brief because you've said most of what I have on my paper. So I commend Professor KL about the resistance. And we have a sister, Sister Ngozi, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Women's Studies and Intervention. There is a program she's doing there with women across the board, and it has to do with synodality in action. Not just women religious. So from time to time, they invite women from town and out of Abuja, as far as Port Harcourt, Jos, Ogoja, Warri, to come to discuss on synodality. These are, to begin with, Catholic women to start with on this particular program. So if we are going to make an impression in the church, we have to open up the boundaries and forget about our petty jealousies and needling each other in the community. Open our eyes to the wider world of womanhood. And what that resistance is just struck me, that this is where we should be investing our energy. Then the association I belong to, PACTPA, the network, the Women Research Unit of PACTPA, we are also trying to see how we can reach women at the grassroots on the continent of Africa. Africa is huge, bigger than the United States many times over. But small, like Nigerians we say, small. If we can work with 2 countries, 3 countries, and give ourselves time, maybe in the next 10 years, we may be able to cover like 10 countries, go to the grassroots and select women natural leaders. Because in our villages, there are women who will come out and talk, other women will follow. So if we really want to turn the table or create a new narrative for women on the continent, we religious women who have been so privileged to have some modicum of education and exposure towards these things should be on the forefront. When I think of religious women on the continent of Africa, my mind goes back to Ezekiel's dry bone. Ezekiel, the valley full of bones. And you can imagine when the Spirit begin entering the whole army of women religious. I think our energies should be focused towards there so that we can get this synodality, going. Because we are here to discuss implementation stage of synodality. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any question for Dr. Arabome? For Dr. Arabome specifically? Okay. Here you go. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I am Sister Eusebia, Grace and Compassion Benedictine sister. My question is to Sister Anne Rabone. I would like Sister to expound more on how to admit the reality of what is happening to women in their struggle to be relevant at this time as religious theologians, and how to embrace that responsibility without being going overboard, somehow feeling like we want to take over and not to stepping on the other side where we think they are also taking the better part, and bringing this down to our young religious, especially those who are coming in the congregation. This is in the formation and in the earlier stages of formation. Thank you.
So thank you very much. If my count is correct, I think there are 2 questions for Dr. Arabome, 2 for Professor Cahill, and 4 for Dr. Osho. So we are going to give them the floor, the opportunity to respond to these queries. We can go in the order in which the papers were presented. So we'll start with Professor Cahill.
I don't know if you're counting the same 2 questions. So I had a sort of a question from Marcel, and then also Sister Caroline, but I don't know if it was really a question. You were expressing a perspective, which I think fits well, though. Was that? Okay.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. And so the first question from Father Marcel was about women's resistance and should it be called interruption? And you sort of asked, like, how can this really get started because some women are facing so many barriers and it's very difficult. And then Sister Caroline was talking about really giving examples of lay and religious women working together and trying to work toward a network of grassroots women and encourage those who are natural leaders so that their abilities would be unleashed, I guess, and empowered. I'll use that word. And it brings me back to what is kind of an answer to Father Marcel's question or a perspective that I think these two questions together lift out. And it's that resistance, direct resistance is sometimes appropriate when some really unjust policy or action has occurred and it needs to be lifted up and justice needs to be demanded, like a reversal. But in most cases, I don't think that's what it really is. I think it's resistance to the relationships that we are all used to and that we've been formed in and take for granted and too rarely question, even when we find them to be unlimiting and unjust and oppressive and creating some of the bitterness that some people are experiencing. And so I would just take Sister Caroline's examples to kind of express what I would want to say, which is the most common and most, widespread really, but also most productive kind of resistance is women working together and also with male colleagues and supporters in solidarity, in serving others, in working for common goals, in magnifying women's power, not power over, but power to. The ability to be effective and to gain what we seek, and to have agency in the communities in which we live. So it's really a power that can be enabled by the Spirit, and that gives a lot of joy. It has energy, it has joy, and some of the joy just comes from the solidarity of the action, even if failures are met along the way. So I feel that it is, it's not limited to a Christian mission, but because it can include many different women. But it certainly reflects, I think, what it means to be church in the world and the mission of the church to the world. The examples that Sister Caroline gave, I thought were good illustrations of what I was thinking. I was trying to come up with some examples, but she gave a better concrete example. That is, lay and religious women coming together, and not just to fight against things directly, but to fight against limitation of women's abilities and gifts. By enabling those, serving, enabling those who have less access, have less education, have fewer opportunities. I think of my own experience as a theologian, and I'm realizing as this conversation goes on that in the U.S. we have fewer women religious, but in the theology department in which I've worked for all these years, I've been in the same institution, I've had several women theologian colleagues who are also religious sisters. In fact, one of my closest friends and co-workers is a sister of mercy, and we co-teach a course in the summers together. And her background is in social work. So we're different, but we have shared goals. And we're teaching the course for Jesuit relief services and young people who are thinking about, sisters and young priests thinking about going into that type of service. So it's empowering, it's energizing. A topic in the course is gender and how that affects migrants and refugees. But we have a great experience. Sister Mombi was there last year, in fact. And to me, again, it's very energizing. So I think that sort of cooperation, seeing ourselves, as theologians and as working together. I mean, not everybody's a theologian, but that's my vocation. Not here are the sisters and here are the lay women, and how can we bridge the gap? But what are the things that we share, and how do we really go after those together positively?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Kay. So we are going to have Dr. Arabone now, so that we can you hear us? Sister Anne? Oh, she's on this. Alex?
She's there. She's there.
Okay. Unmute your microphone, sister. Can you hear us? Unmute HUC, because we might be the ones who are muted actually. Unmute HUC, let's see. Sister. Okay, let's start with Dr. Osho while we sort out the issue with
Thank you very much for your observations about the papers we presented. And to the first question, I'll be very brief. What causes us to be so bitter? I think sometimes some of us are bitter because of the hurts we carry in us, the wounds we carry in our hearts. Some of us have been victimized, oppressed, or, deprived of whatever we call our rights in the religious life. And so because we are not letting go, we become embittered by these experiences. And we have that unforgiving spirit because we are not able to forgive, the hurts that have been meted out against us. And I think that is what basically makes us to be bitter. If we can get rid of that, if we can get above that, because I think we need to look at Christ himself. We say we are following Christ. And if you want to follow Christ and imitate Christ, you look at Christ on the cross. What did he say to those who crucified him? Forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. But sometimes we forgive, they say we are following Christ, but sometimes when it comes to putting it into practice, into action, we forget what we say, that we are following Christ. But sometimes I think we need somebody to remind us of that. And I think such people, they will need help to get healed so that they can get rid of that bitterness and become sweet nuns, sweet consecrated women that we are expected to be. And to the second question, what happens when women do not celebrate women? Perhaps because, they say charity begins at home. And sometimes we forget that charity begins at home. We rather celebrate the other gender, celebrate, but we forget that, and maybe because of little envies and jealousies. Also, apart from we forgetting ourselves, so we look outside ourselves and forgive. I mean, there could be a positive side to it and there could be a negative side to it. So maybe because of the little envies, we fail to celebrate ourselves. But I think we are beginning it now with these African women theologians. We are beginning to, because for me it's a celebration of women. We are beginning to celebrate ourselves. But back in our communities, I think we can do a lot more on celebrating ourselves. Because when we do that, it shows that we are giving a pat to the person at the back and then we are supporting one another, and we are working together, and the synodality actually, already begins among us. And so the third question, lack of joy. Reneza. Well, the religious life, the way it is modeled, is supposed to be a very happy life, a joyful life. I mean, we talk of community life. It's supposed to be a supportive, that's what it's supposed to be. So, but I'm looking at the negative vibes that have become challenges to us. So perhaps in my full paper, and I can, include that, just mention that. But that's what the religious life is supposed to be normally. Where you are happy. I mean, growing up, some of us, it's because we saw one happy sister. That is why, because we visited the religious community, we saw how happy and joyful the sisters are. That's why we entered the religious life. So that's what it's supposed to be. That's the normal, But now, there's something above normal, or below normal that is happening in the life. And that's what I was looking at. What is denting the identity of the religious woman. That's what I was, so it's the negative vibes I was actually looking at. And it said examples of, Sister just mentioned Sister Ngozi Uti. Sister Ngozi Uti, whom I knew her when I just began teaching in the seminary, and how she was always inviting me, come and join this. I mean, she was always out to help young sisters, whether they're in a congregation or not. She was always reaching and sponsoring sisters for different programs to bring them up, young religious. She was doing that in Abuja. And aside that, let's begin from here. Joyful sisters, I was looking, I'm sorry I have to mention names. I was looking at Sister Jacinta when she was under pressure here, under tension. The moderator was, you see her smiling all through. Last year I watched her also, as tired as she was smiling all through everything. You think she should be feeling, the weight of this conference is on me. But at every point I met her, she was always smiling. And there is no child or no young person who will see that sister. It's not that she doesn't have a problem. She has her own problems. And, they say the religious life is not a bed of roses, they say. But it's not a bed of roses. I mean, maybe some of us came into it thinking it's a bed of roses. But even the bed of roses has thorns in it. And the thorns, the beauty and the thorns will also, prick you. And I have sisters here who are out to help, ex-seminarians, ex-sisters or novices. They are here in this hall. I don't want to mention names, but maybe I should mention names. Have people who are known, sisters who are known as mothers. I mean, wherever they are, they light up the place for the young people. And they try to help people who are disadvantaged. There are some of those among us also. So we have so many sisters like that to celebrate. We have so many of them. And I think Mubi is doing something on Watawa. And that's also it. That's a way of, celebrating some of the positive vibes that we find in the religious life. Then to the last person that spoke on the use of media, I think what is needed is moderation. We're not saying this gadgets should not be used, but excessive use of it is what actually we should. So moderation, is the bottom line in everything. So for those young people, I'm what you were saying. I have a niece who is 3 years old, and she picks up my phone, my cell phone. I'm still wondering. I've been wanting to find out. She opens my phone. It is locked. I have my PIN. I don't know how she gets it. And she picks it. And then she goes to, a mom is not in Nigeria. She goes to a mom's number. I don't know how she's able to identify that is a mom's number. I tested her 3 times before I came here last Sunday. And she called her mom. I told them, I said, I'm not the one calling you. It's your daughter who is calling you. I don't know how she was able to get that. She must have watched me, putting my pins there, and she has cramped that. 3 years old. So you can imagine how smart they are, these young ones. And then she takes my phone, she goes to game or music, and she puts it there, and she's watching a dance, and she's singing and making those dances. So all the dances there, I said, God, at what age? 3 years. So what you were saying is true. So when they come in, You have to curb that in them. Curb. But if you ban, from what I've seen, if you ban completely the use of it, they will go behind you and use it. Allow them to use it, but teach them moderation in the use of this. Because after profession, they'll be allowed to use all these gadgets, isn't it? So if you say for 3 years, 4 years, your information, don't use it, and when they go out, they go wild on it. I caught a novice, in the seminary where they were coming for lectures. During the break, she brings out a phone, the cell phone. She goes to the back of the classroom. She's making calls. The novice minister didn't know that she has a cell phone with her. So I just called the novice and I said, come, I think you should provide a phone for the novices, a common phone, where they can make calls. I didn't tell her the reason why I said that. So I said, I think that would be a better option to that. So sister, that's the age we live in, but you have to keep, forming them on the use of all those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Osho. So we are going to, if Dr. Arabome can hear us, she has a floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes. Loud and
well, I just want to say wow to Professor Cahill and Dr. Osho for your reflections and for answering those questions. I feel like you've said everything I would like to say. I think, yes, equality creates a level ground for all. So we don't segregate in baptism. Our status is not a requirement. And I think this should be passed on, even in formation. This shouldn't be a new concept or idea in the way that we imagine ourselves as part of the Imago Dei. Women must take active part in the formation of clergy as well. Women ought to practice solidarity, just as Professor Lisa said. We should be advocates. Women should be advocates for other women. Celebrate one another. Lift each other up. Create opportunities for one another. I think we've all said that in so many different ways. Sister Caroline, you mentioned that too with Sister Ngozi's work. So I think it's time for us to wake up, and to imagine the gifts and the beauty, when we can give encouragement and support, how we, women, will feel seen, validated, and strengthened to pursue our goals and to stand in truth. So there's a lot of work we need to do as women in the way that we support other women. How to admit the reality in their struggle and to be relevant? I think that's one of the questions there. I think we should just name the issue as it is, and approach it with thoughtful leadership. We name our gifts and keep our focus on the goal. Women are African women are very intuitive. We have a lot of gifts that are so needed. When I talk about synodality, for example, I keep saying African women are teachers of synodality already. It's natural to who we are. So we need to allow these gifts to be used in a way that builds, that creates, that nurtures, even among ourselves. So solidarity will create these safe spaces where women can be vulnerable and find strength and flourish together. So I think I would just like to end there. There's a lot of work that we can do as women without even thinking of what the men are doing, or what hierarchy or patriarchy is about. How do we as women support women? It will be the way to go. I think that's one of the path that I will propose for us now. To ask ourselves, how do we engage other women? For example, at the Sophia Institute, we have lay people as well presenting. Dr. Notando is there. She works with us. So it's religious and lay collaborating, working together to create the space for encounters, to create the space where women religious can encounter the Christ that will eventually lead to joy. You know, when we're talking about how come we don't have that joy, it can only come through an encounter. It can only come through an encounter, and you can feel it when you meet a religious, a priest, a bishop who has had an encounter. It glows, it flows. So I think it's important for us to realize that we all have work to do, and we together can bring about the reign of God in the way that we open ourselves for healing and belonging, for solidarity, creates safe spaces for women and men so that we can be vulnerable and find strength and flourish. Together we can challenge unjust systems and create environments that honor dignity, equality, and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arabome, Dr. Osho, Professor Kale. Please join me in thanking them once again. Yeah, thank you. I know there were some other questions, but I invite those who have those questions maybe to approach our speakers during the health break. Since I've already taken too much advantage of your generosity and patience, I think we have gone beyond the time that was allotted. So we are going to end here for today. Do not go back immediately to where you stay. I'm sure there is some tea and mandazi provided for you out there under the tents. Dr. Arabome, we might send you some virtual tea masala and then some virtual mandazi to California where you are right now. So thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very much for your patience today, and I hope you get some rest this evening and you come back refreshed tomorrow morning for the rest of our conference. We are just going to conclude with the glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you. Sorry. I'm going to be beaten by my boss if I don't make this announcement. Now, those of you who are here and who presented papers last year, feel free to approach Sister Jacinta to get a copy of the conference proceedings from last year, the book that was launched yesterday. So approach her. And if you can carry a copy to any of the contributors of the published proceedings who is not here at this year's edition of the conference, also see Sister Jacinta to take a copy with you. So thank you. Okay, and so those who will be going for the excursion at the end of the conference for the outing, you'll need your ID. You need your ID if you are a national, or your passport if you are from a different country. So thank you.
PACIS TV, ta vie renouvelée en Jésus-Christ.